Joe Rogan Podcast, check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
Hello, Mr. Bigelow.
Hello, good morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to get to talk to you, and I really appreciate you coming on here. It means a lot to me. You and I have some shared interests, clearly, in the world of UFOs, but I want to talk. Most people know of you because of Bigelow Aerospace. They know that you're this billionaire investor and you're a very successful businessman, but you have a deep fascination with UFOs.
Yeah, sure do.
How did this all get started?
Back when I was about 3 years old, which would be about 1947, and actually of May of that year, my grandparents had a very close encounter that was dramatic. And they were taking an evening drive in the late afternoon up into the mountains and coming on back down to Las Vegas. And they saw what appeared to be at first an airplane on fire. And the object became closer and closer to them, and they pulled off to the side of the road. And at one point, then it filled up the windshield, and they thought they were going to die. And at the last second, it shot off and disappeared. And I learned of this story when I was probably 10 years old, and because I was 3 at the time, and my mother had told me this story. So I approached my grandfather, and he wouldn't talk about it. Now, after all these years, like 7 years have gone by, because I was intrigued with it. And so I went to my grandmother, and she only would say a few words, but she wouldn't talk. So I got the story from my mom, and my grandfather had to sit on the side of the road there in the car for a while to recompose himself, and because they thought they were going to die. And then he finally was able to drive on back to Las Vegas. So that was the beginning for me.
Did he ever describe what you said? It looked like a plane on fire, but like, what was the shape of it as it got closer?
I don't recall any kind of shape that my mother described. I don't recall that.
But they just knew it wasn't a plane. They knew it was something.
That's right.
Something crazy.
So in the family, the family had an event. And I lived right next door to my grandparents. And the family had an event that kind of started things at that date. For me, other personal things came later. But for the family, that was a big deal.
So this was, you said 47?
47.
And 47 was the time of the Roswell crash. 47 was a time there was a lot of UFO activity being observed worldwide. And the speculation is that this had to do with the nuclear bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and all the tests that the United States had done and Russia had done, and that there was a lot of interest in that. Well, actually, Russia hadn't dropped any bombs by that time, right?
Right.
It was after that. But
Right.
that there was interest in our species by extraterrestrials because they these crazy assholes are detonating nukes. Like, let's go take a look at them.
Right. Well, you had so-called Foo Fighters during the war, these lights that were following bombers. And the tail gunners were the ones that saw them most often, of course. And that happened through the war. And then, of course, Roswell. But before that was Ken Arnold, right? In about June-ish. And then in July 8th was Roswell.
And there's a direct uptick, though, from the Trinity experiments, right?
I think I gather my feeling simply is that without any kind of other evidence or proof that was a huge stimulus. Yeah.
So this was around that time, and you had heard about this as a part of, family discussions,
Right.
And so that sort of ignited the fire initially.
Yeah, and I started asking my friends, as I say, when I was about 10, have you any reports in your family of anything? And by golly, a couple of my close friends told me things that they had never told me before. So, it wasn't that wasn't necessarily an exclusive event, is what I'm saying. Other people in Las Vegas had seen things at close proximity as well.
Now, your relationship to this is obviously something that you've carried for so long. It's been an obsession of yours for so long.
Yeah, yeah.
It started with this, but what personal experiences, if any, have you had?
Well, when I was probably 7 or 8, I used to have what I chalked up all my life to just being silly dreams. And I had maybe 5 or 6 of these dreams, and I could never make sense of them. And I would be laying in bed on my side, and typical dream, always the same. There would be 3 short somethings in a kind of monk robe, and so I couldn't see any face, couldn't see any appendages. And these 3 whatevers were standing there, and they were not too far from my eye level as far as the heights and so forth.
So these like child size?
Yeah. And so there was nothing I was an avid comic book reader, but there was nothing in the whole genre of comic books that related to that, or movies. And we didn't have television in Las Vegas till 53 or 54. And even after that, it was terrible broadcasting, at first. But so it made no sense to me. And so over my lifetime, I never mentioned it to anybody, including my wife. It's funny how you keep things secret, and just kind of for no good reason. Maybe I was be embarrassed to talk about it. But I finally thought, well, maybe it was just dreams. Maybe it was something else. And so that was a first event personally that I had at that time in the subject.
When did you start to connect the idea of these tiny people or human-like things with extraterrestrials?
Well, years later, when I began to start my process as a researcher and as a student in the subject, and began to talk with people who made it their business to be experts in abductions, and the more I got into the field and sat writing out questions for the researcher, for the therapist who would be asking the questions, and I'd be sitting there watching the process. And just over time, I thought, well, maybe there was something more to it, but I'm better off not knowing anything, so I'll just block it off and forget about it.
Yeah, we talked last night about John Mack a little bit, the Harvard.
A great guy.
Yeah. And he did a lot of these sort of hypnotic regression sessions with people where they describe very similar scenarios.
A multitude of different situations. The abduction phenomena was very proliferate in the population, it seemed like. Even we did a survey called the Roper Poll, and we repeated it 3 times so that the margin of error was really reduced to like 1.5%. And abduction researchers came up with the 10 questions, and so we distributed that, and the conclusion was a fairly relatively sizable percentage of the population had some kind of experiences, according to them, according to the researchers, and according to the poll. I am not qualified to speak to the accuracy of whether the questions were that relevant to the conclusions or not, but that's what they said. And and I had in my own research found people that I put them through regression, not personally, but I found a hypnotherapist that could do that, and I found a number of people just here, there, scattered around, maybe somebody in my own staff, and they would come up with these stories and these events.
One of the criticisms of John Mack and hypnotic regression in general is that the idea that you can put a memory into someone's head, that you could suggest things and you could create false memories. And this was something that I've read in the criticism of his work, that this style of hypnotic regression and bringing up these very specific scenarios to a bunch of different people, you can sort of help create, especially in people that are easily influenced or people that are open to suggestion. You could put these false memories in their head. And so, especially when you're dealing with something as fantastic as a
Right.
UFO or
Right.
alien abduction or visitation or something like
Right.
that.
Oh, that's definitely possible. There's also something called screen memory, but dealing with the power of suggestion. That's absolutely true. But my experience was with different hypnotherapists, they went out of their way. In fact, maybe if they did make a suggestion, it was just the opposite. They might say, okay, you're on board this craft. Where's the lighting coming from? Is it coming from the corner or of the room that you're in? Well, there were no corners, and they'd be corrected right away by the person being hypnotized. And so they went just the opposite direction on purpose to make suggestions to maybe coax the person to come that direction, and they wouldn't do it. The person wouldn't do it. Now, screen memory is different. Supposedly, if somebody has a very close encounter with supposedly somebody that's ET, you leave that the memory turns out to be entirely different, and that's put into you consciously, and you recall something entirely different than what actually happened. Maybe you saw two deer on the road, or
Right.
something of that sort, or maybe there were owls or whatever. So that's what's purported to be.
What's crazy to me is if you go back to Betty and Barney Hill, if you go to Travis Walton,
Yeah.
if you go a lot of these abduction experiences, people that did not know each other, and particularly we're talking about before social media, before any of this stuff,
Right.
they have very similar stories, like similar to a disturbing extent.
Yeah. Well, Betty and Barney Hill was accidental. I think somebody had Betty or Barney had a sleep problem, and they went to try to get some therapy for a sleeping disorder. I think there was some kind of connection like that, but it didn't have to do with, oh my gosh, we have this recollection. The story evolved through the therapy, and in order to try to fix this other problem, all of a sudden this story starts just to flow out, and so I don't know whether it was Betty first and then Barney later, and I think Barney resisted going under hypnosis, I believe, and then everything just started pouring out. So
There's a woman named Angela Hill. She's a top UFC fighter, and she's actually the granddaughter of Betty and Barney.
no kidding.
Crazy. And I didn't know about it until after we did a conversation. I was interviewing her, just talking to her about her fighting career.
Yeah.
And at the end of the conversation, she, like, when we were done wrapping up and about to leave, she's like, "Oh, I forgot to tell you." And then she tells me
Wow.
that her grandparents were Betty and Barney Hill. I'm like,
ki-
what?
That's amazing.
That was her grandfather. Which is
Did you inquire? Did you ask?
yeah, we
her?
talked about it. Yeah, we talked about it, and she didn't have much of a memory of him, but her parents recalled the scenes
Right.
that he described, and obviously it became this huge national story.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember hearing about it when I was a kid. So
Sure.
I mean, it was in the 1950s, right? And
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there was no archetype that you would sort of model your memories after. I would wonder, like, if I ever did hypnotic regression today, I would be very skeptical of my own memories, because I've heard so many stories
Right.
of these spaceship encounters. I've talked to people like Travis Walton. I've talked to people like Bob Lazar. I've talked to these people that have had these experiences with these things. I would think that my memory might be tainted by my expectations. But you can't say that about Betty and Barney Hill. These people, there was no stories like that before then.
no.
This is not some pop culture thing that they were
Right.
latching onto.
Right.
And even the way they described these creatures, the similarities between their descriptions and Travis Walton's descriptions, 20 plus years later,
Right.
it's very eerie.
Right. And the same thing with like Ken Arnold's sightings. That was virgin territory back then in
Can you
47.
explain that to people?
Well, so Ken Arnold was a pilot, and
That's in that movie Phenomenon, right? Isn't it described in that?
Maybe so.
The phenomena?
Maybe so.
Okay.
And so he was flying over Mount Shasta or somewhere in Washington there, and saw these objects, 9 objects, kind of skipping along in formation. And he, being a professional pilot, was able to estimate their speed, calculate that, and they were traveling way too fast for conventional aircraft. And the shape that he described was, I've always thought of them a little bit of a manta ray shape without the tail, kind of a little bit of a curved boomerang kind of shape to the craft. And that got an awful lot of attention because he was a very credible fellow, as were other people that later revealed their own sightings, military backgrounds, people that had major rank or captain rank, So they had stories you would listen to, about their experiences because they were professional observers in the military. And
actually, while we were out eating dinner last night, Dan Crenshaw sent me a text, and I shared it with everybody at the table, and it's from American Airlines pilots that saw some spectacular sighting over the last couple of days. Right. And they're, trying to figure out what the hell these people saw, but something that sped by them at some insane rates of speed, and there's a recording of them discussing it.
Whether it's abnormal or conventional, that should never have happened in that proximity to that aircraft, right? So if it were an accident, that's a really bad accident to have come that close. And if it were flying in the line of flight and it sped that fast over its head, it was really moving.
Yeah, well, was a conventional commercial aircraft go 400 plus miles an hour? American Airlines pilot reports seeing UFO. An American Airlines pilot reported seeing a long cylindrical object flying right over the top of the plane as he was flying. Sunday's American Airlines flight AA2292 was operating from Cincinnati to Phoenix using an Airbus A320 aircraft over the northeast portion of New Mexico at 37,000 feet during what was otherwise a routine flight. One of the pilots contacted air traffic control at Albuquerque Center. He said, "Do you have any targets up here? We just had something go right over the top of us. I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast right over the top of us."
So what's missing is propulsion signature, right? So that should have been evident that it had some kind of propulsion.
That you could
exhaust.
See the burners.
Some kind of exhaust was going on, right?
Yeah.
You would think that they could detect that if it were in the line of sight, if they were behind it.
Well, that's a very short description, though. I mean, maybe it did have some sort of propulsion that they saw.
Yeah.
That's all we saw. I mean, maybe there's a report that'll come out where they describe it in detail. That's just them calling it in, right?
Yeah, if it's not super unique, then it was one hell of a mistake, right?
Yeah, I mean, but it's just... Yeah, there's a lot of those. That's the problem. There's a lot of these, and there's video of them, like the one, what is it? The one that's on the East Coast that's moving over the surface of the water at insane rates of speed, and you see it, and it also no heat signature, no obvious method of propulsion, and it doesn't exhibit, because that one was done, I believe it was infrared, the camera, so you should have been able to see some exhaust or some heat signature that was showing how it was being propelled at that insane rates of speed. And and you hear these pilots who are used to flying, they're flying fighter jets, and they're like, holy shit, look at this thing. Yeah. And they're kind of freaking out.
Well, the good news is there are so many more people with cameras and with cell phones these days, and so you have a much more aware public than you did 25 years ago. In 1997 was the so-called Phoenix Lights.
Yeah.
And they weren't just lights, because that craft started from northern Arizona, some say maybe Clark County, Nevada area, and proceeded down south toward Phoenix in the twilight of the evening, where thousands of people saw structure. It wasn't just lights. It wasn't just, could it be confused with flares, aircraft dropping flares, and no such things had occurred anyway at that time of that day. And so people saw structure, and the structure was estimated, quarter mile maybe from tip to tip, boomerang kind of shape, kind of craft. and yet that should have been a really big deal news-wise. Right over a major city, so many observers, and but it wasn't. And then you had...
But it was, though, right? Because we all know about it.
Well, but then, of course, the governor at the time was Fife Symington, and we know now that he didn't know what to do because he was an actual witness that he admitted to 10 years later of actually being a witness.
Right.
But he didn't know how to address that.
Well, that was the famous press conference.
That was the famous press conference.
He had a guy dress up like an alien and made a
on
mockery
stage
of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If he had done just the opposite, what might have happened on that with his testimony as being a witness, a governor of a state, and then draw that other people then might have come forth more and more volume of folks saying, yeah, me too, I saw it.
With your understanding of the way the government sort of processes this kind of information, that it's not available to everybody. And the information in terms of like what these things are, what they aren't, whether or not they're some sort of top secret aircraft that the government is working on, or whatever it is, they don't, unless they're making press conferences about these things, they don't necessarily want to broadcast what it is, and they certainly don't want to broadcast it if it's not one of ours. Do you think that they contacted the governor and informed him that he needed to make a mockery of this? Or do you think it was his own personal decision?
My feeling is it was his personal decision. And my feeling is that the government is not that organized anymore. Maybe it was back quite a while back, but I don't think that I think that denial is able to be carried forth without government encouragement.
So he probably did it just to calm everybody down.
Yeah.
I mean, he probably felt tremendous pressure, right? Because I remember this was an enormous story. I mean, it was going all across the United States as people were talking about it, and then there was all sorts of sort of semi-reasonable explanations about dropping flares. The thing about the dropping flares, though, were that they hovered in the sky for a long time. Like, it didn't make any sense that flare, like, are they defying gravity? How are they just, because there's video footage of it from multiple sources, home footage where people are filming these things, where there's these red lights that are just hovering in the sky. But the red lights coincided with these triangular-shaped vehicles or boomerang-shaped vehicles that other people were seeing.
Well, there were people living on Camelback Mountain, and this is how low this craft was to the surface, is they got a edge-on view, coming practically at them, just slightly went over the mountain.
But there's no video of that, right?
Not that I don't know. There could be. I've never seen.
And this
that.
was 97.
97.
Yeah. See, that's phones back then. Not everybody had a phone, and they didn't have good cameras.
Right.
The thing about even today, with cameras, and most cell phone cameras aren't capable of seeing things at a zoom, like with the exception of the Samsung Galaxy series, the new ones. They actually have a setting where you can take photographs of the moon because they have some pretty spectacular zoom capabilities. It's pretty interesting stuff. And if you got one of those and you saw something in the sky, maybe you could zoom in on it and get a good shot of it. But, you're talking about things traveling at insane rates of speed. It's very far away.
Yeah.
You're really not going to get much anyway.
No. It's got to be much closer to really have definition of what it is you're looking at.
Now, there was a story quite recently of a pilot in a fighter jet that took a photograph of some similar shaped object, some triangular shaped object, and apparently it was very, very clear image. It was a very clear image, and there was some speculation about people releasing this and that they were going to release it, and there was hesitation about releasing it. Do you know about this?
Well, is that the one off the East Coast?
Real recently.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Do you know what I'm talking about, Jamie? I think we discussed it with
the picture that you can see. They zoomed in on it.
The picture apparently is bullshit.
Okay.
That picture apparently is not real, but
there was one taken by a pilot in the plane.
Yeah, but
a couple, 2-3 years ago, sometime.
Oh, a different one.
Is that?
See, this is
he took it out
Pentagon
of the
responds
canopy.
to release a photo taken from Navy pilot showing unidentified objects. See, I had heard that this was nonsense. I heard from people that are in the know that this is not the image that they're talking about. The one they have, this is according to people that are in the military. The one that they have is much clearer than this.
There's more than one image, right?
I don't know.
We may be talking about different ones.
Maybe. I don't know. Okay, breaking. Debrief Media has learned the leak of an unclassified photo said to have been widely distributed in the intelligence community, which purportedly shows what the DoD has characterized as unidentified aerial phenomenon. I don't know if that's... See, look, obviously I'm just talking out of my ass, but what I had heard was that was not the image in question, that there was a much clearer image in question that was pretty stunning, that they were debating on whether or not to release. Because once... The New York Times in 2017 published that front page article that showed some of those images that had been captured from the video cameras and that fighter jets experiences and talked about Commander David Fravor's experience with the Tic Tac UFO off the coast of San Diego. That sort of like released a lot of pressure on the concept of if you discuss these things, you're a foolish person. Right, for a long time, and I'm sure you must have experienced this because you've been in the game for a long time, right? Discussing UFOs in 1970 or in 1980, like people would look at you like you're probably crazy or something, right?
I was too busy being in business in those years.
You didn't care.
I had a little plan I was following that I put together when I was a kid, and I was on a mission to be in business, to acquire resources so that I could someday have fun chasing this stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the more interesting things about you. Like, you became like a hotel tycoon and a real estate tycoon, gathered up all this money so that you could study UFOs.
And do fun things maybe in space.
Yeah, well, you've also been involved in creating shelters and structures that people can actually live in space.
Right.
There's the Genesis and the Genesis...
Well, we call it the B330 is what we have in our plant right now is engineering units, which are flight units as far as hull and bulkheads are concerned, and longerons. And so we had to shut down because of the COVID, but we have very advanced structures.
Yeah, and these have been implemented too. Some of them have actually been, you've actually put these things.
We have a TRL-9 because we have a scale structure that's on the ISS now.
Yeah, so your dream in a lot of ways of getting involved in aerospace and in space travel, like this is real. Like,
yeah,
you're a guy who actually has contracts with, big government.
Not that I've ever made money back, It's been a bottomless pit.
Has it been?
Yeah, sure.
So you've just done it as a passion.
on maybe a hope and a prayer, kind of thing. Hail Marys.
And part of it is because of your obsession with extraterrestrials.
I'm not. I don't know. Probably there probably is a connection there because you're made aware that there is a whole lot more out there than what we know and what people think. So there probably is a connection. It always was.
Do you have any images of that? See, let's pull it up so people can see what we're talking about, the stuff that you've created. Yeah. So this one.
So that's an older version that we did quite a long time ago. We have a full scale. That's just a 1/3 scale. Basic architectural features and accommodations for living.
Space habitat.
Now, I think those are full scale architectural renderings. Now down at the bottom, so that's full scale.
That one right there?
Yeah, that's an old version, but that's a full scale. That's 330 cubic meters, and it's a more crude mock-up than what we have now. And the standard volume on a module for the ISS is about 120, or the largest is around 120 cubic meters. So 330 is about almost three times that.
So when you design one of these things, or when you go into business to create one of these things, what's the steps that you're taking? Do you contact engineers? Do you bring in? How do you decide that you want to go into business to make these things, and how do you go about implementing it?
So, it's been a 20-year process, and first you try to engineer. Nothing about the origination was original with me, because I became incredulous about what NASA had done in the early 90s with something called the Transhab. And it was a vehicle to take people to Mars. And Congress cut the funding for that. Oh my God, how could they do such a thing? Because it was very apparent that craft was really cool for a lot of reasons. And so I started the company, started putting money in it, and started going after that. And then after about 3 years, acquired a exclusive license to use their patent just for the enclosure. No book of instructions came with it. There wasn't a manual saying, here's how you do this. And so we started from scratch, and we had no assistance from NASA whatsoever in arranging the architectures and engineering. And then through a process of trial and error and testing, destructive testing, long duration leak tests, destructive because you had to try to quantify the strength of the materials. And we were using factors much more demanding than the factors for metallics, factors of 4 instead of metallics maybe 1 1/4 or something. And we finally engineered envelopes that were very durable. Ballistically, we did a lot of what's called hypervelocity impacts tests, where you shoot a particle at about 7 kilometers a second, 6 to 7, depending on the type of gas gun you're using, and seeing how well the structure can defend against something going that fast. Actually, the defense on something going fast is easier than a particle going slower, like a bullet, for example. Kind of crazy, but for some reason
And when you mean defense, you mean something like micrometeors or space
actually
junk?
It's smaller than that. Maybe the size of a centimeter, which is actually a big particle historically to hit something, like the station or whatever. I think maybe some of the solar rays have been hit by something that large, but so you're defending against also radiation. Aluminum structures are not what you want to be inside, especially for deep space missions outside of LEO, low Earth orbit. And there's something called secondary radiation that propagates. So, and the background galactic radiation has heavy protons, and it's more lethal.
So what did you do to shield your habitats from radiation?
Well, the hull has no aluminum structure. So, and the hull is a matrix of many layers of different kinds of materials. And those materials are like Kevlar, or Vectran. We use Vectran a little bit for a couple reasons, but it's like Kevlar. And so through a series of other materials in addition to that type of material, you start to evolve a shield. And the shield on a B330 overall is about 15 to 18 inches thick. And there are spaces in between layers. So it's not as though you compress it and it's going to be 1.5 feet thick.
Right.
But it's those spaces that make a difference in how debris breaks up and finally just becomes dust. Or if it's too fast and too large, It's not dust. It's going to succeed on going through.
And when it does, is there a patch method
Yeah.
they use to?
First of all, you have to maybe locate. There could be things on the hull that are in the way, because you use the hull as an attaching surface, and so that volume is very useful. And so assuming you've located it now, and it depends on the size of the particle. If it actually was significantly large, it'd blow off whatever was attached to the hull. Maybe just put another hole right through whatever was attached, so it'd be easier to find the hole. That's the good news. Bad news, the gas is, your gas is escaping a lot faster. So you do have some time, though, in a large volume for that gas to totally escape. So then you have to make a judgment as to, do you have time to create the patch? And it's actually a fairly simple process, because anything you put there wants to stick to the wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
But depending on a basketball size something, there's not an explosion. It doesn't go boom like a balloon. It just loses gas, your air. And so you'd probably have time to go to the airlock unless you were on the potty
So you'd have
or
to
something.
escape.
You'd have time to escape.
But that would be the move. You really wouldn't be
You'd
able to
want to,
pack a
you want
big
to be able to
hole.
go someplace else. Hopefully you're attached to something that can accommodate whoever's on board.
Why did this become your area of specialty when it comes to aerospace? Like, why did you invest in this? Why did you invest in habitats?
Well, at first I played around with some other companies. I invested in 2 or 3 other companies in the late 90s. They were rocket plane type companies. I came very close to investing in what Burt Rutan was creating before Virgin came along. And so I was looking for someplace to go, somewhere to put capital, money, and energy and passion into something. And so I did these investments in these different companies, and then I stumbled on the TransHab, so.
So your initial idea was maybe some sort of commercial space travel type investment, something like Virgin Galactic or something like...
Yeah, I really didn't know. I think the most enticing thing was what Burt was working on. And that the financial model for that was very attractive. I think he's a aircraft design genius. He has so many awards, you hardly can count them. As you walk down the hallway to his office, it's like floor to ceiling plaques, You got a couple extra just for souvenirs, something, But, and so he's a total genius. And he, by the way, had his own UFO sighting that has stayed with him all his life.
How old was he when he had
I
it?
don't know. You'll have to get that story from him, but it's worth listening to. So many people have, So anyway, that's how I started in that, and I fell in love with the concept of expandable systems, launching something with a finite fairing diameter and length, and being able to triple the size of that volume once it's ejected and it's launched, and the fairing opens up, and now you start to expand and inflate, and wow. All that you can do with that volume is really cool. And
so this allowed you to, these contracts, if you're doing it with the ISS, are they with NASA or like who, is that who you work with?
Yeah, NASA's basically has been the only game in town for us and for most folks. Most folks in the rocket business, other than for the Air Force who buys launches for satellites, NASA is the game still. And when NASA's financially hurting, everybody hurts. Depending upon who is providing the leadership, both in Congress and in NASA and in the White House, you can do fantastic things. So it's all a combination of whether or not people can all work together. If they're fighting in Congress and going on, you're not going to get much. You're not going to go places like you could. Yeah.
So with you being involved in this and creating these habitats and your long-standing obsession with UFOs and potential alien life, getting involved with NASA must have been pretty exciting. You're like, well, maybe I'm going to learn something now.
Oh, definitely. You're definitely going to learn. Absolutely. they have a lot of good people and very expert people. So you're going to learn a lot. It's a great place to to sponge all that you can.
But I mean, learn things about UFOs and alien life.
Oh, that. Oh no, I was back about space, conventional space travel.
Well, that too. I mean, what better way to learn?
You're not going to learn anything about UFOs and ET from the vast majority of the scientific community, and that includes NASA and everybody else.
Are they not interested?
I think it's a combination of things. I think the reason for that is not because they're not interested, and a lot of people are, because I'm asked things all the time. A lot of people are. I think there's always the concern of embarrassment. I think they're not in a position to be an investigator. They might have a passion and want to do that, but it takes time. It takes time and effort to go do those things. And usually you want to stick to what your career is, right? So, and maybe they've had somebody in their family that has had a tremendous story, and so they'll carry that with them, and they might buy the books, they keep at home, they might brown bag it, not bring it to the lunch at commissary where other people can see what you're reading.
Right.
So it's all different kinds of things, so everybody's different, right?
So there's kind of maybe a shame or something along that line involved in pursuing extraterrestrial ideas?
Not as much as it used to be.
Right.
Now, it was much worse 20, 30 years ago.
What was it like then?
Well, as I could speak to just the general science population was much more reticent to talk about UFOs 30 years ago, I think, than today. There's been so much more exposure on the media. Mm-hmm. So, because you have regular television program now on aliens, ETs, ancient aliens, whatever, doesn't matter. It's all over the place compared to 25 years ago. So it's a different kind of world. But the thing about the UFO ET subject, as you continue to do research and work in that whole community, is a kind of a strange frustration about acquiring a little bit of a taste of understanding about the possibilities of locomotion, of movement, and where we are. That we're still working with fire engines, and thank God for people like Elon and Jeff Bezos. I really respect those guys, and including Elon's secret weapon, Gwen, his president. Those are the country is so lucky to have them, but the dynamicism of UFOs and ETs is so overwhelming as to what that world is like. And if it's all true, or even some of it true, it's more than just a holy cow. It's, oh my God, So it's like night and day comparison. Yeah. And here we are still in 2021 and still waiting to get back to the moon.
Well, I think when we were talking earlier about the New York Times article, I think that was a real a pivotal moment in the culture's acceptance of the concept of these things. Because when you see something like printed on the front page of the New York Times,
sure.
When you see like people like Commander Fravor, very well respected, all full respect. No one thinks that guy's a kook.
Oh, no.
You read about his experiences
Absolutely.
and you go, okay,
Absolutely.
There's something to this.
Yeah. And Leslie Keane, the journalist that did that article, did a terrific job.
Fantastic job.
Fantastic.
And it's a dangerous subject for someone.
Yeah, it is.
You're open to ridicule.
Sure.
But the preponderance of evidence had gotten to the point where there was enough out there where you could say, listen, this is not something to be mocked anymore. There's something to this.
Right. That's right. When you have like Commander Fravor and we hired Doug, one of the pilots there. We learned about that in 2008. The event happened in 2004. So you have really credible people seeing something that's totally anomalous and has no business doing what it's doing.
Right.
So you got to take it really seriously.
Not only that, things that have been tracked by instrumentation, things that have gone from, it's like 80,000 feet above sea level to 1 foot in less than a second, and then traveled to the agreed upon destination where the plane was going to go later.
Yeah.
Like they knew where they were traveling to.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was able to travel at an insane rate of speed that's not even. It doesn't make any sense with any technology that we've ever even theorized.
No.
So these are things that were tracked by instrumentation. So it's not. This is the best instrumentation. This is instrumentation that's used by the United States military to protect the borders. It's all the real shit. So when you read things like that in the New York Times, everybody has to kind of go, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you couple that with hundreds of thousands or millions of other events and stories that have happened over the last 50, 60, 70 years. You think, oh my God, we're so far behind, of what else is going on.
Right. Because we've been so afraid of ridicule.
How long is it going to take us to get to that point?
Right.
And do we even understand even the beginnings of the physics of it? Because what if they're consciousness operated? That's it. You don't have the right mental signature. It isn't going anywhere. Nothing is coming on. There's no lights. The dash didn't light up.
Right.
So
sort of like when you walk up to your car, like I have a Ford F-150. When I get near it, it knows I'm there because my key fob.
Sure.
And
Sure.
when I touch the handle, or
but
like a Tesla.
If somebody else has
example.
your key fob,
yes,
it's gonna light up.
But instead of it being like a Tesla key fob, when you get to it, the handle opens up so you can open the door.
Right.
Like as you get close to it, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, sure.
But instead of that, it's actually your consciousness.
Yeah. And what if you're not even close to it?
Yeah.
What if you're on the other side of the planet and you want it to start?
Like you can with a car with an application. Like if you have a Tesla, you could roll your windows up with the app. You could lock it with the app. Right? It operates through Wi-Fi. Yeah. Who's to say they can't do something like that with consciousness?
Yeah, we have no idea.
I mean, it's not even that's not even outside of what makes sense. If you looked at if you followed the technology and the technological improvements over the last 15, 20 years, and you explored the possibility of what could be done in the next 100 or 1,000 or 100,000 years. Right. Go, yeah, that's not even crazy.
Yeah. Well, and our physics is incomplete, in my humble opinion, because it doesn't provide answers for all the paranormal basket, not just what we're talking about with ET UFOs, but all the other kinds of stuff that has been done in laboratories for many, many years, on camera, by people that have performed really strange things.
You mean like quantum mechanics and?
No, like micro, macro, PK. Just take something simple.
And what is that? Micro,
macro,
PK?
Just manipulating material objects, whether they're electrons and so or a bottle cap. And so let's say you've got a screen computer, and it's hooked up to a random event generator, and which is flipping a coin, many hundreds of thousands of times a second, and it's establishing a firm, even line, this 50-50 across your screen. And then there's another line coming along, and your challenge is to have the two lines deviate. So you're and I don't know. It's been so many years since I was in the Para Lab with Bob John and Brenda Dunn. I forget the exact details on this, but the point was there was a line that was created, a second line that you were to think about and try to deviate that line, and you should not be able to do that at all. So they had maybe one flat line on the screen, and then you had this random event generator that should be 50-50 right alongside that same line. But it's not. You're causing it to go up or you're causing it to go down. And they had a lot of people successful on this, many, many, many. And they did just a huge number of trials that were successful. So that's in the smallest context. You had, that Russian woman, Kalignia, something like that was her name, that worked with objects in a bell jar. and she would be able to manipulate them, cause them to spin, cause them to lift. And
Objects. What kind of objects?
small objects, something small.
Microscopic? Like
No,
how
no, no,
small?
no, like a bottle cap. Something that size.
So some sort of telekinesis?
Macro PK. So it's some kind of a consciousness connection that is causing that effect on that object.
Yeah, this is something that's been filmed?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So this woman is doing what?
And
How is
she died at a relatively young age. Her heart, they said, would go up to like 180 beats or 90 beats a minute, and I think,
while she was doing this?
yeah, and she was just
So
tested.
this is this lady?
Oh, your guy is good.
He's the best.
He is the best.
So what is she doing here?
Well,
Oh, this is like really old stuff, huh?
oh yeah.
She's moving.
What are those, matches?
Yeah. But she's also moving that piece of metal.
Right. And there's other ones where she would do this, and these things would be in a bell jar, I believe. And
So she's not touching it. She's making it move.
yeah, and I think they literally wore her out.
What year is this? Yeah, but here's my problem. This is something that's on the table.
Right.
I can't see below the table. I can't see if there's a magnet. I can't see what's underneath this deck of cards. There's a piece of metal. You can move things around with fuckery. I don't know if this is real. And those matches were moving because that piece of metal was moving the matches, right? So the piece of metal was plowing the matches, and she's got it moving around. I'm not buying into this.
But on its face,
Yeah.
it's really intriguing.
It's intriguing, but it's a party trick. Like to even, I don't even like the way it's set up. The way it's set up on a table, and she's doing this with her hand, and her lap is right there, and anything could be happening there. It's cool if it was real, but
Right.
and that looks really old. Like what year is that?
I don't know, probably 50s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. But so the point really is, if you were to make it a job to accumulate this kind of information from as many sources as possible, you'd really have a large volume of stuff, and then you'd have a lot of material to look at and analyze, not just one case. I think it's easy to look at one case and have doubts because it is just once. It is
Right.
one situation.
Do you think that things like psychic powers, like or psychic or an understanding of other people's thoughts and ideas, these are maybe possibly emerging aspects of human beings? Like as a human evolves, as we go from being, a tree-dwelling primate to being what we are today, where people are intuitive and we can sort of read social cues and we understand each other and we can talk and communicate using sounds and noises, that as the human animal evolves, they'll eventually develop some sort of a psychic power.
So that, in a way, that's connected to supposing that those psychic powers already exist to some degree.
Maybe in some people more than others.
Right.
Right.
So that means there are white crows, like we talked about last night.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you explain that concept
Well,
to people?
there shouldn't be any white crows. White crows aren't white. So there shouldn't be any anomalies like that. So if you come up against a white crow, you've really found an anomaly. So now the question is why? How did this happen?
Well, it's an albino, right? It's just a genetic
So it's a metaphor.
aberration.
Right. So it's a
Right.
metaphor saying you've really come across something that shouldn't
rare
be.
thing.
It shouldn't
Yeah.
be.
Right.
There's no way this should happen.
Right.
Right. And oh my gosh, here's another one. And it's a cousin. It's different. It's in a different area of the whole psi basket. What's going on here?
Well, we already know that there are extreme variations in intelligence. We know that there's people that are just not that bright, and then there's people like Elon Musk. And these people like this have
Well, he's not
existed
from here.
forever.
We know
It's
that.
Probably.
He's not from here anyway.
Yeah, most likely. If there's an alien amongst us, that's
Right.
him.
Right.
But I mean, if you go back to Nikola Tesla, it's sort of the same sort of situation, right? He was clearly of not just superior intelligence, but superior vision. He had this ability to look at things that didn't exist and figure out a way to create them.
Right.
And that's a very unique thing. And what is causing that? What firing of neurons, what personal experiences combined with education, combined with innate creativity, makes a person create something.
But
like,
that's not as paranormal.
No, it's not. But it's a different aspect of being a human being. Now, we all know that some people are more intuitive than others. Some people are more sensitive than others. Some people are better at understanding. Some people are really good at picking out liars. Some people are really good at picking out talent. They understand people better, right? As the human animal evolves, we could only surmise that those types of skills and those types of qualities that a human being can possess could possibly get better. If you get two very intuitive people, they have a child, and the child is even more intuitive than them, and that some aspects, unprovable, unmeasurable aspects of psychic power could be something that's emerging out of the human animal.
I would never say never. I think a lot is possible. I think what may more likely would happen, because we're shifting now to taking normal human physiology, which is a separate situation from being able to perform things that are more unique than just being creative. So I think that you might have, small circuitry and small things that are added to the human brain to enhance its capabilities,
like Neuralink.
Yeah, and that's much more likely in terms of human evolution than that future generations are going to become enormously psychic and enormously cause and effect using consciousness. So whether it's clairvoyance or telepathy or psychometry, macro PK, remote viewing, the whole basket, those are all real, and they have all world-class performers in every one of those things. Remote viewing is a great example of this because we know for 20 years the CIA and the Army had programs in this, and so did the Russians.
Right. And we talked about remote viewing last night, too, that I'd done an experiment on a show that I had, and it wasn't effective at all. But that could have been that the person that was doing the remote viewing was a fraud. And that maybe there are people that do have that ability. Now, has it ever been clearly demonstrated that someone can do that? Have you seen it personally?
Well, I've hired somebody to do it twice for me, but I've also...
And what do they do?
Have friends that ran the programs.
What did they do? What the people that you hired?
I tasked them to describe a longitude, latitude, location, and describe it, what was the surface, what was underground, those kinds of things.
And they were accurate?
Yeah.
How accurate?
Very accurate, and give me information that to this day I don't know if it's true or not because it was underground information that I don't even know. But it just came as a here's a bonus. I'll tell you what's underneath.
So the government had these programs, these secret programs that they were studying remote viewing, but their official conclusion was that it was horseshit, right?
Oh no,
wasn't it?
Oh gosh, no.
Not public.
No, that was never concluded in that way.
What did they say publicly about remote viewing? Did they ever say it's 100% effective and real?
I think there would probably be at a point in time it was classified for a long time. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then it became more public eventually as the program aged and so forth, as things usually do. To be 100%, you could acquire by having more than one viewer have the same target. You increases the likelihood of the accuracy of the information. 100% is a lot to ask for because you're getting a drawing at the same time you're getting conversation, and sometimes the drawings revealed more than the conversations did. So the remote viewer would also be in a position as an experiencer. So if his or her target was at a certain location that and the person was eating an orange, for example, a remote viewer could almost taste it, could almost hear the gravel that the person was walking on, feel it under their shoes that they're walking.
Now, what was the methodology? How would they go about doing this?
So first of all, the aspect of this is though you're over the person's head that you're So we have to go back and say there are different kinds of remote viewing, first of all. So I'm just taking one type where maybe your target is a person, and the person is at a location, and maybe the location is a wharf, a boat dock. There are a lot of boats. And maybe there are gravel pathways getting there. Maybe they're having a fruit in their hands, an orange, apple, whatever. And so the remote viewer is back above the head, kind of like an out-of-body experience is the way that those are reported. And you're watching yourself going down, and we can talk about that later, going down a hallway, but you're above yourself. Same way with remote viewing sometimes. They would be in that kind of a position. And so did you describe everything in your drawing? Maybe not. Well, then you didn't get 100%, did you? But you were spot on as to where they were. You could go find that location, and that's actually where they were at that point in time. That was true. That's exactly where they were.
So they were able to figure out where people were, and they were able to get a sort of an understanding of what they were doing and how they were doing it and what their surroundings look like.
That's the tip of the iceberg.
The tip of the iceberg. But what was the methodology? How would a person remote view? Would they be alone in a room? Did they have to achieve a certain state of meditation? Like, what did they do to do this? So
they would be in a room, and with a control per controller. I forget the terminology now that they used. So the remote viewer would be there at a desk and pad and paper, and there would be the person sitting across as a controller, and then at the appointed time. And it depends on how these remote viewing sessions were constructed, I think. The real people that you should talk to are the guys that ran the programs. I'm just,
I talked to Ed Daines. That's the guy that I talked to, the only guy.
I would recommend people like Hal Puthoff. He would be a very, very good person to talk to on this.
So how would someone learn how to do this, and who figured it out initially?
Don't know who was necessarily the first. You have early players like Pat Price, Ingo Swann, I think Helen Hammond, Joe McMoneagle, those kinds of folks. And I'm not sure the genesis of how it began. A lot of times things happen by accident, right? And you stumble on something and say, oh, wow, what just happened?
Right. But it has to be some sort of a repeatable skill, like something that you could teach someone how to do, right?
Yeah, and I believe what I've been told is that most people have some degree of abilities that are beyond the five senses. And some have more of those abilities than other people. So it can be taught and built up and developed, but some people are more predisposed to certain kinds of stuff than other people are.
And so how would they train people to do something like this? Who was the first person to figure out that they could do it, and then how do they train other people to do it?
Joe McMoneagle has a book. I think he authored it back in 1993, and he had, I believe, a near-death experience about 1970-ish, 70. And there's a lot of literature out there on the shelves that people can buy. They can get a hold of this stuff without having to talk to these fellows and these people. And the stories are amazing as to what they can do. So and purportedly distance is irrelevant. I mean, you could do something thousands of miles away, and that could be the target. And you can describe that target. It doesn't have to be on the surface. It can be a building. It can be inside a building. It can be inside a room. I mean, it really gets strange.
And so you have actually experienced this, and you are 100% on board with remote viewing. You think it's real?
Well, I've experienced it to a wee extent. I hired a fellow to do it twice.
But he did it.
He did it.
That's not we. That's pretty big. If the guy did it, he did it.
And I sat once. I got to sit behind a screen on a computer to play around a little bit. So I don't have any real experience, with this. I just have a lot of admiration for the people who manage the programs and who can function that exercise. It's really amazing. There's an old story about Ingo Swann. He's passed over, but
How can I say that?
He was
passed over.
He's
You don't say he's passed. He's passed over.
Well,
like
now
he's
you know
gone.
where my thought is about things.
Well, I do know where your thought is about things, but I just find I'm going to get to that too.
Okay.
But the way you describe it, he passed over.
Oh, there's a story I love about Ingo. He's being tested. As always happens, you're trying to verify, right? Trust, but verify, always. And like you're doing exactly what you should be doing is questioning, always questioning it. And so he's being tested by officials, and they have a submarine that that is his target. He doesn't know what his target is, of course, and it might even have been a blind or double-blind situation. I don't know. But they go to a lot of effort so that maybe even the person that's with you doesn't know what the target is. That's usually the kind of protocols. So, and he identifies the sub. He identifies the sub accurately. And this is a advanced sub that he's identifying. So, it's underwater. It's deep, and he's able to see this thing and describe it. So it makes them pretty uneasy. And they're impressed. This is like, wow, this is a big deal, this guy. So it's not like just how is he doing this? It's like he did this. Right. So they're calling the meeting kind of to a close. He says, well, don't you want to know what's following it? Duh, right? See, then he starts describing this other craft that's following behind the sub. Ingo was an amazing guy.
What was the other craft?
I guess it was some kind of UFO, something else that wasn't another sub, of ours or Russians or anybody's.
That's one of the speculations about unidentified flying objects, is that they're not just flying, that some of them actually exist underwater. There's been many sightings of things that went into the ocean.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, supposedly aren't there stories even about Christopher Columbus' crew and so forth seeing things going back for centuries, things coming in and out of the water?
Well, that was part of the Tic Tac, the Commander David Fravor's encounter, that there was something below the surface of the water that was creating a wake, almost like rocks.
Yeah, well, it was churning,
yes,
right? It was churning.
It was a very large thing, and that it went under as they approached, and the Tic Tac craft faced them, and that they don't know to this day what that thing was that was under the surface, but that's what led them to go and investigate in the first place. And as they were going towards it, that's when they realized that there's this thing like roughly the size of this room that's
in
floating
that
around.
Carrier group was a ship or two that was bristling with electronic equipment, and it's the first thing that sensed something out there. And that's when my understanding was, and I'm going back a long time now, was that's when they were launched to go check it out. Because what was out there shouldn't be out there and behaving the way it was behaving according to all the electronics on this ship that was part of the battle group.
Right.
With the aircraft carrier, I think a couple of subs, it was a battle group. So, and then they had eyes on the target now.
Yes.
Right? So they're able to see firsthand for themselves what's going on. And yeah.
And when they were speaking over the mic, they had found out that they had been encountering these things over the last couple, because when Commander Fravor was inquiring, like, what the hell is this thing?
Yeah.
The other end was saying, like, we've been seeing these things over the last few weeks. Like, no one knows what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, like, what do you do about that? What do you do about something?
I think sometimes better left alone. If they're really behaving fantastically, and they're not the Russians or Chinese or whatever, go have a sandwich. Forget about it.
Well, I don't think they had a choice. I mean, you can't catch it. It's literally jamming your radar. You have images of it,
right.
And then you're tracking it, and they're moving in a way that is literally impossible with our technology. And
right.
What do you do?
Yeah.
You can't do anything. What are you going to go to war with it? What are you going to do? You're going to try to grab it?
And it's not like it's offensive. It hasn't tried to attack you or do anything.
They've done nothing. Yeah. It's a very strange situation to be in, to be, a fighter pilot with the most sophisticated military equipment, and to encounter something that is beyond the scope of even imagination of what's possible.
Right.
Yeah. You had encounters with Bob Lazar. You know Bob, and you were around when Bob Lazar first.
Now, is this going to be all about the Mylar balloon event?
What's the Mylar balloon event?
Oh, you don't know that one?
No.
So we all jump in my car to go out to the Alien Inn area out there, on
The Alien Inn, is that
out there at
it's like a
north
a
of
bar or something.
S4, north of that area. And so Bob Lazar, George Knapp, myself, and I think Gene Huff, who was Bob's friend, we all go out there. Well, unbeknownst to me, Bob has a Mylar balloon, which really bounces the radar signature a lot for its size, and a bottle of gas, helium. So we find our way back out in the desert out there. We're I'm thinking we're on a UFO watch, which is always fun. Sometimes the best thing is the food you take along, right? And you're out there under the stars, and it's nice, and you have a good time just watching. So, but there's a rustle of things going on here, and next thing I know, there's a balloon, this Mylar balloon's inflated, and there's a slight breeze, and Bob lets it go. And we're on the opposite side of the mountain range from supposedly S4. And he wants to go that way. Thank God the wind was going in the opposite direction. It was traveling north instead of south. And it went the wrong way. So I'm thinking my life's just passed before my eyes.
Why do you think your life passed before your eyes? Because if the balloon goes towards Area S4,
it's going to get picked up. Yeah,
and then they're going to go find out where it came from.
And Wackenhut Security is going to come get us, and I'm going to spend the night in jail.
Right.
So it all just unraveled real quick.
And was this before Bob had gotten in trouble for bringing people to the observation point to watch? Because let's tell a story about Bob real quick. Bob said he worked for Area S4, and he was hired to back engineer what they believe were alien crafts. Along the lines, he had this top secret clearance, and along the lines of all this happening, they're monitoring his phone calls. Turns out Bob's wife is having an affair. Bob doesn't know about this. They remove him from the project because they believe he'll be emotionally unstable. He's freaking out, not knowing that his wife is having an affair, not knowing why he's pulled from this project, doesn't totally understand. So starts telling people about what he's doing and telling people, listen, I can take you to a place where once a week they do these tests. So he starts bringing people to this area. They see these objects flying in these spectacular ways that we really can't do with any of our conventional aircrafts. And then Bob gets in trouble for that. Then Bob goes on the George Knapp show and starts explaining all these different things, presumably for self-preservation, because the best way to probably protect your own life is to go public with this and explain everything that's happening. And they can discredit you and make you look like a nut, but if they kill you, then it leads credence to your story.
Yeah, it gives you a very huge hardship.
So when do you fall into the story?
Well, you've just given me an overload of information now that I'm pretty much aware of, but I don't know exactly when. I don't think, as I recall it, everybody was pretty much at ease, and I wasn't. It wasn't part of.
What year is this that this is all going on?
Oh God, I don't know, 91.
So this is around that time. This is around
91,
when was he
92.
on George Knapp's show?
Yeah, somewhere in that time frame. But I wasn't aware of a lot until I don't think at that time I was aware of him taking people out on, Wednesday nights to go see something out there. I kind of missed out on that or whatever. And I don't think this was anything like connected to that.
I think that was before this.
Yeah, probably.
That was, I think you're dealing with him out after, he had met George and after he had told his story.
Yeah.
Because George is with you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously they had already met.
Oh, sure.
So what was your initial, obviously you're a person that has a deep fascination with UFOs. Now here you are talking to this guy who's clearly a genius, brilliant guy, Bob Lazar, and he's telling you this fucking bananas story. He's out there back engineering spacecrafts that came from another land that are using this element 115 This stuff that's just a theoretical element that wasn't even proven by particle collider until what, 2013, somewhere along that line. Like, it was just theoretical up to that point. So he's telling you about all this stuff. What did you think?
I wanted to reserve judgment until I knew a lot more, and the more he talked, the more interesting it became. The more research that George did, things that he uncovered, it became more interesting. And so, as I said a while back, I think George was doing an interview with me, and I said, I wouldn't bet against the truth of the majority of everything that Bob has said. I wouldn't bet against it. Could they be errors and omissions for different reasons? Yeah, sure they could. But I would tend to say Bob is legitimate, and there's certain aspects of things that are parts of stories that you wonder, well, how could this happen, and so forth. But I think if you take all of the collective information and the work that George Knapp has done to validate things, it's awfully damn impressive.
But George is such an important part of it because he's a legitimate investigative journalist, and that was his career. And so he poured himself into this.
Oh, yeah.
And exposed all the different aspects of this story that seem to indicate that he's telling the truth.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
and that's what's crazy about it.
And George is not any normal journalist. He's like what? He has like 6 Peabodys.
Yes, he's fantastic.
And
so he's diving into this, the more he uncovers, the more it seems like Bob Lazar's story is legitimate.
Right. So I think I like the philosophy of reserving judgment until you have a preponderance of evidence that really moves you one way or another. You don't have to have 100%. I go by reasonable doubt.
But what was it like for you to be this guy who's had this deep fascination with flying saucers, and here you are talking? Like, let me tell you my experience with Bob. Doing the podcast with Bob, I wanted one of two things. I wanted to go, oh, this guy's full of shit. Or I wanted, whoa, this guy's, it seems like he's not full of shit. I think he's telling the truth. I think this guy really did encounter these aircrafts and really did work on these spaceships, whatever they are. That's where I'm at right now. My experience with him, my communication with him, he didn't seem like he was full of shit at all. He's clearly a brilliant guy. His story has not changed at all over the 30-plus years that he's been saying it. It's a crazy story. But when you are a person like yourself, me even more than I, who is obsessed with this subject, the possibility of alien life that's visited this earth, and maybe even left crafts behind, and maybe these crafts are in the possession of some secret government agencies that are trying to observe them and back engineer them. What is it like to talk to this guy? Because this guy has seen the thing you're looking for. This guy, you're searching and all of your wondering and staring out into the heavens, and here's a guy that has actually touched it, actually worked on it, been inside one, tried to figure out how they work, can't do it, doesn't understand it. Is talking to these people. Everything's compartmentalized. You got the metallurgist people that are working on the what kind of alloy this thing is made of. You got him, who's a part of the people that are trying to understand the propulsion system, and then you've got people that are giving you this information that, like, maybe they have been here forever. Maybe this is a part of an archaeological dig. Maybe they've been trying to study these things for decades with no advancement at all.
Yeah. So we came across, myself and a couple other people came across folks who could collaborate some of the things going on out there. Such as silent craft actually lifting off at nighttime, not looking as though the control was very good, but actually lifting off, maneuvering like a real small trial kind of thing. And that fellow observed it from a distance where he wasn't supposed to be. George has come up with collaboration, I think, from two or three other sources also, besides what Bob said, about certain aspects of things out there. It's just that Bob's story is so much more in depth, so much more detailed, like that book that he talked about years ago coming across. Amazing things.
So tell people about the book?
Well, there was a book, as I remember, there was some kind of a book that Bob was allowed to look through, or he seized the opportunity to do it when he was in a room where the book was, but I think that was by design. And it was some kind of a holographic book that as you opened up the pages, whatever the stories were became a hologram. That's my recollection of a conversation that's decades old now. So, if I got it wrong, fire me.
I understand.
You'll have to talk to Bob about that, would you?
Okay.
Or talk to George.
Okay.
And because I remember something like that. I mean, that was like, wow, what an amazing way to portray information in some kind of a book and actually have holographic images coming forth out of the, I don't know. It just was, so that I haven't ever heard of that being repeated any place in terms of something else like that happening. And so much that happened to Bob, it was so unique.
There was also some very strange summary of what they understand or what they believe to be true about the origins of human beings, and that they believed that what these visitations were about was that human beings are the product of accelerated evolution, and that these species from wherever had been coming here and doing genetic experiments with primates and created human beings, which is the ultimate, like, who knows, like, wow, that's fun to think about. But we were talking about this last night, like how bizarre humans are, that out of all these things on Earth, we're the only ones with shoes. Out of all these things, we're the only ones that have to wear clothes. We're the only ones that jump into metal boxes with rubber tires and roll around on these hard surfaces that we created, or fly in planes, or send video through your phone to other people that are on the other side of the continent. We're weird. We're real weird. We're way weirder than anything else that exists. And if we are really a product of some sort of accelerated process like that, this is how they get the party started on these planets. They find semi-intelligent, curious animals that are using tools or using, opposable thumbs, and they do some things to them.
Yeah, there's a large variety of potential beginnings. More evidence for some than others, right? So that's always the trick.
Have you considered that? Is this like a subject that you've deeply considered and thought about?
Not really.
Really?
I'm here. I don't want to look a gift horse in the face. I'll take it for what it is,
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
I think about it a lot.
I don't know. I think I need more evidence to be more curious about. I'm more concerned about other kinds of things that are now than where did the human species come from particularly. I'm more driven by other kinds of things that could make a difference today going forward.
So getting back to the Bob Lazar thing, when you first got to know him and you first were considering this story and how crazy it was, what was it like to meet a guy who, at least by his own accounts, had encountered this thing that you were seeking?
Well, Bob's a likable guy. He, as you said, he's very smart. And so he's interesting to talk to, right?
Yeah.
And so that's more than just entertaining. To listen to his story is profound, right? So it gives you an awful lot to think about and to try to position as to how can you measure future information you might get against that story. How can you verify different kinds of things? And so I've heard a lot more silly things, I think, than And then what Bob was talking about didn't seem all that ridiculous. And then the more you get to talk to him, the more you get to know him, and people like George, who's an investigative journalist, it gets more and more, wow.
Yeah. It's if there's like one thing that I could know about on this earth involving human beings, I think that's the thing. There's a lot of things I'd like to know. Who killed Kennedy? I'd like to know. There's like a lot of things I'd like to know. But whether or not that's real, to be in that hangar and see that ship, and to go walk through it with him, and to really understand that this is not from here, I think that would be the one.
And have crashes been intentional?
Yeah, that's a weird one to me. We were discussing that last night. The problem with that is there's also this discussion of alien bodies. If crashes have been intentional, so what do you have? Suicide bombers just for our own edification? That seems silly. And that's really disheartening to think that someone could come here from another galaxy and still get tripped up by lightning.
Yeah, but maybe they're just anthropomorphic. They're maybe they're
right.
More robotic, and
maybe that's our future.
At what point does a species have a spirit or a soul? I mean, could a machine, even if it's very advanced and can think better than we can think and calculate faster and actually understands fear, love, passions?
Right.
Would it ever evolve to having a soul or a spirit? So I mean, that's a good question. Yeah, it's a different kind of question.
It's also a good question as to, are those things imperative for life? Like we when we think of ego, when we think of our mating instincts and all the various pleasant and unpleasant aspects of being a human being, how many of them are impediments to growth and progress? What is growth and progress, right? Are we trying to achieve mastery of the elements and of life? Are we trying to keep peace? Are we trying to make things better but stay human? Like, what are we trying to do? Because when we talk about artificial life, it's just artificial in terms of the fact that another life form has created it. But if they figure out a way to... You've seen Ex Machina, that movie?
No.
You haven't?
No.
How dare you? How dare you? Go out and see it right now.
Hey, I'm living in the desert.
Well, listen, they have movies in the desert. I've been to the desert. It's a great movie, fantastic movie, one of my favorites ever. And it is about this super genius guy who develops these artificially intelligent humanoids. And there's a lot of, suspension of disbelief when you're watching a science fiction movie that takes place in, modern era that has robots that look exactly like people and have emotions and thoughts and stuff. But it makes you wonder, how far away are we from something like that? Some super intelligent thing that we create ourselves, and then it can create other super intelligent things. I mean, are we 50 years? Are we 100 years? When is that going to happen? And is that going to happen? Or are we going to become some sort of symbiotic creation? Are we going to merge with technology instead of create some sort of technological being? Are we going to become one? And that's one of the things that I've always been very curious about when it comes to these aliens, these iconic aliens that people experience. They always seem like what we will look like in the future. If you look at a chimpanzee or a gorilla, they're much more muscular than human beings. They're much stronger. They're covered in hair. And they have smaller heads. And then our heads are bigger. Our bodies are smaller. We're weaker and softer. And then if you continue to move forward and we advance and evolve and eliminate a lot of the problems that human beings experience, whether it's because of war or crime or all these different things that trip us up as a society and as a culture, these things are all connected to the tribalism and biology and emotions and the desire to sexually procreate. If they eliminate all of those things with technology over time, and you get these genital-less aliens that have these enormous heads and that don't communicate with mouth noises anymore. They communicate with thoughts. And they don't have the need for physical strength anymore, so their bodies are these tiny childlike things, but they have godlike powers. Is that our future?
So is there a prerequisite in all of that for the reptilian brainstem to be eliminated? Is there the potential for in either inanimate objects or combination biological material, android type of objects to have consciousness? And what is it to be human in the first place?
Right.
Well, if you have bred out or artificially created something that is close to whatever perfect might be, as opposed to a human being that's very imperfect, a human being has all kinds of imperfections, all kinds of emotional imperfections and capabilities that go from here to here. And so that is what it's like to be a human being. We are very imperfect, and so we're in a class by ourselves. Now you introduce something else. Maybe our consciousness is unique to being a human being, and it's not possible to actually evolve consciousness in an artificial mechanism. So, and consciousness and thought are two different kinds of things, like mind and brain are two different kinds of things. So consciousness, to me, is a force. Like we just saw Calignia, whether you think it's real or not, but there are many other demonstrations of being able to use consciousness, attention, as a force upon something, to either gather information you shouldn't be gathering from remote viewing, or moving an object. It's a different kind of force. Thought is a creative mechanism. So, and thought can come to promoting the force, in other words, to channel the conscious effort. Don't mean to be getting off the topic, but I think...
No, I don't think it's off the topic at all.
Okay, so then it comes down to, even if you did create those kinds of advanced beings, whatever, why did you do it? Why? Is perfection that important? I mean, does everything have to be perfect, or isn't there some beauty in having some imperfections?
Well, here's the question. All of the human elements that we talked about, whether they're emotions or the desire to procreate sexually, or jealousy and rage and territorial behavior, tribalism, all the awful and great things about human beings, ego, all those things lead people to want to do things to get recognized, to get attention. And they also want to get recognized for their achievements. And they also want to push things past the boundaries that have been established by other people that are in the same business or the same creative venture as them, whether it's artificial intelligence or whether it's art or creativity or music or anything that people do. They're always piggybacking on the work of the people that came before them. It's part of being a person. With everything, with architecture, with technology, everything is piggybacking on the work before it. And these things are motivated by these very imperfect aspects of being a person, by ego, by the desire to be loved, by all these, and even by the positive things, by curiosity, by creativity. All this soup of influences are all making people advance technology and innovate. That, if you just extrapolate, if you just look at what technology is, and if you look at what we're doing, if you were from another planet and you had no idea about human culture, you had no idea, and you had no familiarity to the human form and to what our life is like down here, and you looked at us, you would say, well, what is this species doing? What are they doing? Well, I'll tell you what they're doing. They're making stuff, and they're making better stuff every year. That's what the species does. What do bees do? They make beehives, they make honey, but they do the same shit every year. Human beings don't. They need a new goddamn phone every year. The TVs get bigger. The cars get faster. Everything they do is better. The computers have more terabytes of hard drive. Their processors work quicker. The video cards are better. Everything's better. No one's settling for less good. Everybody wants better, and they want better constantly. And they want to show their friends. It's part of being attractive. Look at Johnny. He's got the new car. He's got the new phone. She's got the new watch. You've got the new Oculus Rift headsets. You got this and that. We make technology. It's our primary thing. We work, we get ourselves together like human batteries, and we generate income and revenue, and we're all obsessed with making or buying better stuff. That's what we do. Now, what does that mean ultimately? Well, it means technology. Technology is the pinnacle of human achievement. It's the stuff that puts us into space. It's the stuff that allows us to videotape things. It's stuff that allows us to essentially capture time. You could capture time on a phone and play it back to people. This is when I showed Jeremy this thing. We both laughed. Ha ha ha. Look, you can laugh too. You could laugh at our memory. That's what it's doing. Well, we're going to get better at that. It's going to keep getting better and better and better. Well, where does that lead to? It leads to some sort of singularity. It leads to some sort of paradigm-shifting invention where all of these technologies piggyback onto themselves until we reach some sort of pinnacle of human achievement. And I think that's probably going to be some kind of artificial life or some sort of a symbiotic relationship with technology where it literally, instead of carrying around like a phone, like a baby that you don't want to leave behind, it's going to be in your body.
I don't think it's enough, and I don't think it's altogether better.
I don't think it's altogether better either, but I think it's going that way.
I think you've got half the coin.
Half the coin.
Yeah.
You're
missing the other side.
What's the other side?
Okay. So you've built this societal empire of technological achievements, right?
That's what we have right now, right?
Well, and who knows in 50 years or 150 years, whatever. Okay. I think you've just described an infrastructure for a serious problem coming.
Yeah.
What if you were to create a graph, and on the graph were just two things, two lines, and you were tracking over the last 150 years spiritual maturity among the species. 20th century was the worst annihilation of people, 60 million people ever in terms of numbers, wars, right? What if you were to track in that same graph the progress of technology? Well, you'd have one vertical line, the technological line, in the 20th century and now, and it would probably be segmented, which I mean it's jumping. It's going faster than arithmetic progression or any normal progression. It's jumping. So, and it might be at a 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 situation. Now you look at the spirituality line. It's practically flatlined. So what's the consequences of that eventually?
What do you mean by the spirituality?
I think a species needs to have grounding spiritually. I think a species have to have an essence of spirituality, something that in their being, to their bones, says it makes a difference what you do. It makes a difference how you behave for your overall good and the good of others. And it makes a difference.
So an intelligent species like us, not just all species.
Correct. Sure.
The most intelligent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Allegedly.
So if you don't have a grounding, though, in a solid spiritual philosophy in a species like us, like humans, then you're rolling the dice on handing a species that might be immature spiritually some very advanced, dangerous stuff that can be used as weaponry or just misused and abused in other kinds of ways. And then maybe the species thinks it knows it all and is cavalier, is careless about the way the disposition of the technologies. But more than likely, it's hostile because things tend to be weaponized. So you wind up with a species that's more like the Klingons than you want.
Right.
So you wouldn't want to be on some other planet and having these discover you, right? So I think those two lines are really important to try to harmonize. The problem is there's no intersection in sight. In our lifetimes and other lifetimes, there's no intersections in sight. We haven't even begun to create a homogeneity of spirituality in the human species compared to the proliferation of technologies. So that incongruity can be a really serious problem someday, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we continue to concentrate only on things and on improving technology, but not improving the way we communicate with each other and love each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what's the solution?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's the big, that's the $64,000 question that they used to say.
Yeah.
Old television program. Yeah, I mean, that's what is a solution, But who ponders that? Who ever ponders this?
Only people with a lot of free time.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. Some monks on a mountainside somewhere, some Buddhist someplace.
That's the problem with the way we live our lives. We're very, very busy with things that aren't exactly spiritually satisfying, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's a tremendous amount of noise for attention, and so when do you get the time to think?
Right. When do you?
Who, me?
Yeah, when do you?
I'm too busy running in circles.
But I know you think about these things, and I know you've thought a lot about consciousness, and this is one of the things that you've studied. And one of the things you're involved in is the concept of whether or not consciousness extends beyond death.
Right. Yeah.
And what do you think?
I think it's a really important subject. So we have two Holy Grails, right? And the second Holy Grail is, are we alone, as you've said, and everybody kind of is attracted to that question. The other is, do aspects of your consciousness survive your bodily death? So is there a difference between mind and brain? So is brain the generator and mind is a reservoir and actually more causal than the brain is, in a sense? So in theory, the question relates to, gosh, you are doing away with the brain if the container decomposes and dies and is permanently offline. Are there any aspects of your mind that continues? Does your consciousness continue? That is a question that has been attempted to answer since maybe the dawn of man. A loved one has just died. Is there any way to recapture that? Any way at all? Well, no, it's written off as it's gone. And that is just a relevant question today as ever, because you have a lot of disparate kinds of folks' beliefs, and you have religions that are against that notion altogether. And so you have a huge amount of differences in people's philosophy, and driven by religious beliefs or just the way they've arrived at their own conclusions or whatever. So you have to be respectful of all these different kinds of beliefs, and try to yet approach that subject in a way that is somehow determinable. Try to arrive at something that maybe is not 100%, but can you find answers in different ways that drive you into the high levels, 80, 85, 90, 95%, that you're leaning towards that. That would be really good news if you could legitimately do that, and for yourself, and know that you have something else in addition to this.
Or that's always been what religions have strived for, right? To show people that there's something more than this life.
Oh yeah,
There's something
it's
beyond.
their backyard.
There's something waiting.
Yeah, for the majority of religions,
Yeah.
it's their backyard, and there's all kinds of promises about what our backyard contains. If you're a follower of our religion.
Yeah, and the cynical people would always say, well, they're just trying to promise you that to get you to behave in this life, but there's really no evidence whatsoever that anything happens once you die. But then you have people that have had near-death experiences, and those are the weird ones, because they've had these near-death experiences, and they almost always come back saying it's going to be okay. Yeah. They almost always come back going, there's something more to this.
Right.
And
right.
We don't know what those near-death experiences are. We know that certain aspects of them can be recreated with psychedelic drugs, and we do know that the brain produces psychedelic drugs, particularly DMT. And people that have had experiences on psychedelics have had these moments, like Larry Haggard, the guy from Dallas, remember that?
Oh, yeah.
He famously was on CNN once, and I watched this interview where he's talking about how he had a high-dose LSD experience once. He never worried about death ever again. And he was talking about it, and the CNN anchor was clearly a little rattled, because I believe what they were talking about was his green home. He had this home that operated off the grid, and he had it all set up so it was really well insulated and solar powered and all this stuff, so that he could not have a heavy carbon footprint.
Right.
So they're talking about this, and along the line, they get to talking about his LSD experience and death. And it was pretty trippy to see him say that and to see them going, oh. But many people that have had intense psychedelic experiences have had this thing happen to them where they believe they've gone to another dimension. They've gone to this other place that seems more real. From my own personal experiences, I've had these, where you go to these realms that seem more real than the realm that you're living in, and you encounter something, whether this something is an imaginary or whether it's actually, you could put it on a scale and measure it. I'm not sure if it matters, because it's still a thing you experience.
Did you have, after these experiences, did you have any kind of evidence afterwards that you could draw a connection between what you saw in the visions and actually now what you discovered? I mean, was there anything that popped up later on that connected the two?
No, there's no evidence. There's even the memory is shaky. Like your memories are shaky, just like the memories of a dream are shaky. But when it happens, and I've done it a bunch of times, every time it happens, you're like, oh yeah, I remember this, because it's so intense.
Each time that you do it, is it more vivid?
No, it's always vivid. You can't get more vivid. It doesn't get any more vivid. It's way more vivid than life.
What do you learn as you've been doing this multiple times? What's the lessons learned?
Abandonment of the ego is a big one. That's the big one. That your ego and your desire to protect yourself from failing or from reality, that those things are ultimately very detrimental to your consciousness, very detrimental to the way you communicate with other people, and that it's a battle, a constant battle to abandon these monkey instincts that we all have, and that these things have protected us and gotten us to this stage, but they can ultimately trip you up as you try to sort of understand yourself better.
So, you're just hitting on something
Yeah.
in the literature of survival of consciousness, of which there's hundreds or thousands of books that you could actually access and people to talk to. The message seems to be in the literature, abandonment of the ego is a very important thing to do. It's a very important thing as you've passed over. That's one of the things that happens, is try to remove the ego and shove it aside.
Yeah. That's it seems to be that's an impediment to learning in a lot of different ways. It's an impediment to learning art. It's an impediment to learn because you think you're better than you are if you let your ego lie to you.
Oh, sure.
It's same with
Sure.
technical skills, physical skills.
Sure.
You can lie to yourself, and
Yeah.
a lot of that is the ego. But the ego is also what keeps you alive. It's the thing that makes you want to be successful. It's the thing that makes you want to progress. It's the thing that makes you want to accomplish things. Like it's not, and the key to one of the keys to an actualized life is to progress, move your motivation away from ego to the fascination in problem solving and acquiring skills and getting better at tasks. Is that there's something interesting in it, and especially if you're doing something that benefits other people. When it benefits other people, that you get better at these things because these other people get to enjoy these things on a higher level. Then you get this cool feeling of actually benefiting people, actually helping people with your fascination with these things.
Right.
So and the more you concentrate on the ego, the more it'll taint whatever progress you're making. Taint whatever thing you're creating.
So back to the near-death experiences. So let's suppose that you just look at the ones that come along naturally. Somebody has flatlined on an operating table, they've fallen through the ice, whatever. Okay, so there are so many near-death experiencers. I mean, I've heard numbers that are ridiculous, in the millions, people, and in this country, not just in the world. And so there's a hell of a lot of smoke. There must be an awful lot of heat somewhere in terms of the probability that this is real, because other explanations are really tough. Now, you can have out-of-body experiences, and you can validate conversations in a room. You should have no way of understanding where tools were taken from what drawers or anything like that, what people look like, and yada yada, because you're gone. You're under anesthesia, right? There's no way. And yet, the literature is replete with stories, thousands of stories like that. And same thing with near-death stories, huge volume of information, every example you can possibly imagine. And so then you wonder, well, how can you correlate that? How can you correlate anything to do with, did the person have an experience, not just through the tunnel, but what they saw afterwards in that period of time after they exited the tunnel into wherever they were? And how do we verify that what they actually saw was the other side?
Not only that, you have different human beings with a different understanding of language.
Yes.
So they have limited vocabulary or limited ability to describe things, or a limited ability to express themselves. And maybe they're not so good at relaying what it was.
And does it fit with their religions?
Right.
And their philosophies?
Right. Right. Yeah. And how much of it do you distort when you get back to make yourself feel better? How much of it how much do you actually share with people? I mean, remember you were talking about your childhood experiences. You didn't even want to share with your wife. Like when people have a near-death experience, maybe some of it's like unpleasant.
Yeah, I didn't want to share it with her. I mean, she might have said, "Hey, go sleep in the other room."
Yeah, hey, crazy.
Yeah, I don't want you around me. So why take the chance?
Well, people have a real fear of being ridiculed. And to be ridiculed for a near-death experience is probably similar to being ridiculed for a UFO encounter or ridiculed for any other super spectacular thing that most people are never going to experience.
Right.
Yeah. So when you have talked about this, the ability to measure whether consciousness exists outside of life, how can that be measured, and what steps can be made to try to quantify and to try to validate whether or not this is a real thing?
You don't want to hear this.
I do want to hear this.
All right.
How can you say I don't want to hear this?
Well, I don't know. I'm just
Anybody
guessing.
wants to hear this.
I'm just guessing. I'm sitting here with a reptilian brainstem trying to keep up. All right. So how do you verify a near-death experience? It might be that there's some kind of messaging that can happen from whoever greeted you temporarily on the other side, because you are coming back. And maybe that message can be verified in some way. Maybe it's something that doesn't even make sense to you. Okay? So you do come back. You snap back into this reality. You're alive. And sure enough, what was conveyed to you from the other side actually happens. And it wasn't something that was expected. It was profound in some way. And so that might be a way of verifying through this message that you had no way of knowing or predicting that this was going to happen. There's also the subject of psychic mediums. All right. I can see your stone face right now. You're not buying it. All right.
I didn't say anything.
I know.
I always give stone face.
I'm looking at you.
I give stone face when people talk.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, most psychic mediums I think are full of shit.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
Doesn't mean they're all.
Well, okay. No, we'll say that again.
It doesn't mean they're all full of shit.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Yeah. And some are a whole lot better than others.
Yes. And some, look, it's like everything else. There's con artists out there.
Yes.
And then there's people that are genuinely unique.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. World-class performers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so of course you can't help yourself but try to get information that falls in the categories that they should have no way of knowing. In fact, you might not even know the information yourself at that moment in time.
Right.
You'll say no, or it's only later after you've listened to the recording or whatever that, oh my gosh, they were right, and this and this and that. So that is a very important source of information, assuming you're talking to ones that have been legitimatized, right? And they've been bona fide.
Do you know any?
I know a very good one.
You know a really good psychic medium. Can I meet that person?
I don't see why not. I mean, it's up to them too, right?
Yeah.
But I think that would be, I would, I'll ask.
What does this person do professionally? Are they a psychic medium professionally? So they make money doing it?
This person isn't motivated by, as far as my understanding is, by just doing these things as a business. This person will do things, will do readings pro bono, without a fee, without charging.
That's promising.
And
that helps. That helps believe you, or helps you believe them, rather.
They have a family, and the person has a family, and so on. So
it's always a woman. Why is it always a woman that's really good at it?
What did I do?
Is it a woman?
Do you hear that? What did I say?
Is it a woman?
Actually, yes.
Yeah.
Well, it is interesting why psychic mediums tend to be women.
I think because women have to be worried about men because men are fucking crazy, and men are more violent, and women are probably more intuitive because they got to pay more attention to these assholes.
Well, pound for pound, they're the best astronaut there is.
Women?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. You get all that brain power in a package that doesn't weigh as much.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, you're launching less weight, so there you go. Okay, but all kidding aside, psychic mediums are a really good, legitimate source of getting alternate information that helps to collaborate things maybe that have happened other ways, or information that's come maybe from a near-death experiencer.
Okay.
For example.
But outside of psychic mediums, when you're talking about measuring whether or not consciousness exists outside of life, whether or not your consciousness somehow or another transcends your physical body.
Right. So you've heard of automatic writing.
Yes.
And I don't mean that means.
Can you explain it to people?
It has nothing to do with your wife automatically going into your checkbook. It's got nothing to do with that.
Do people write checks anymore?
That's automatic writing. Okay.
They don't do that
I'm
anymore.
Old-fashioned.
They bank online.
I write a check.
I write a
check.
But what is? Explain automatic writing to people.
All right. So apparently, it's something that has occurred for many, many years, over especially back when the study of spiritualism and the whole investigations of psychics was very, very strong from about 1835 or 40 to 1930ish. And then it has continued in some ways up until recent times. So you have somebody who is writing and they are being controlled by a spirit. Okay?
Or they're in a trance.
Or maybe they're in a trance.
Yeah.
But they could be lucid. Doesn't have to be in a non-lucid trance or anything. They could be lucid in their writing, or they could be in a trance. And maybe they're not writing in the vernacular and language that they're used to. Maybe they have a 6th or 7th year education. And they're writing very sophisticated information.
Have you experienced this?
No. I don't. I'm a explorer and a researcher, investigator, a student.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to gather information through other ways, and I've had personal experiences, but nothing of automatic writing. So anyway, again, the literature is huge on this subject of automatic writing, and it's easy to dismiss because it just seems very strange. You're being possessed. You're actually being controlled. Right?
But has anybody ever verified any of this automatic writing stuff?
In the literature, yeah, you have a lot of information that the writer isn't aware of, shouldn't be, doesn't know. It's not. It's outside of their world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there has been different kinds of cross correspondence and other kinds of ways of verifying that this didn't come from this person. Something else is going on here. It didn't come all from this person. It's not right. It's completely illogical. So, so that's one means of adding something to the menu.
But when you're trying to measure whether or not consciousness exists outside of life, just because someone's automatically writing, they could be receiving some signal from someone that's still alive. If there is some sort of psychic communication, if there is a possibility of remote viewing and you can transmit information from person to person without words, and this is one of the ultimate goals of Neuralink. Elon Musk actually said you're going to be able to talk without using words. I mean, if human beings, if it's possible to do something along those lines, this could be a live person that's somehow or another projecting these thoughts, and someone else is tuning into them in the same way you would tune into a radio signal.
Okay, so the way you would test that is probably it's going to be, what's the nature of the entire subject matter? How extensive is this subject matter? Because at some point you're adding on so much weight and so many different variables that it stretches the credibility of that theory working. It's kind of like using ball lightning as an excuse for all kinds of things when it has a very short life, usually travels in one direction, and is very, very, very rare. So everybody uses Occam's razor as this is what you do. You want to go to what is the simplest solution instead of trying to find swamp gas to describe the craft that just landed. So, I would say, that's probably testable. You could probably create the methodologies to do some laboratory type tests on that. But my guess is that would fail as a solution.
But you see, we're talking right now in these weird terms because I don't know if that stuff's real. I could describe what I think would be wrong with these scenarios, but I don't know if any of this remote writing or automatic writing has been verified. You do.
Through the literature. The literature.
Yeah, but what does that mean, though?
Well,
it's through literature. People are full of shit. They write things down that aren't true.
It just means that we haven't set up experiments ourselves to verify it ourselves and actually implementing it under controlled conditions, double-blind conditions.
Yeah.
Right. So what else do you have to resort to? It's what's in the literature, thoroughly digest and pros and cons and everything from a lot of sources, and people who have engaged in this And maybe they have film. Maybe they actually have film of the writing, and you compare the handwriting. Maybe it's different handwriting altogether. Maybe it's in a different language completely. In fact, there are stories, a lot of accounts of exactly that.
But this subject of consciousness and whether or not consciousness exists beyond life, this is something that's important to you. So I'd assume that you've looked into it further than just this idea of automatic writing being the only piece of evidence.
Actually, that area is the least I've looked into.
Automatic writing.
Automatic writing.
What's the area the most you've looked into?
Well, now, first of all, I have kind of recaptured this survival of consciousness inquiry that I was into in the 1980s, and I have now formed an institute called BIX that started in June of last year.
What does BIC stand for?
Bigelow Institution for Survival of Consciousness, and for conscious survival. Bigelow Institute for Conscious Survival of Consciousness, and this organization is very new, and so we're in a method of trying to stimulate research and investigate and catch up on the literature. We have a unique situation where we have people around us that have ongoing things happening.
Ongoing things.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Different kinds of events that are being reported by family, staff, friends.
Like?
Apparitions.
Ghosts.
Yeah.
You believe in ghosts?
I have.
It's fun.
My experience is, well, there's a difference.
Fun to believe in ghosts.
Yeah. Well, there's a difference in terms of what causes you to believe in something the most. Personal experiences? Probably. So my personal experiences are not having ever seen an apparition. My wife did. I have had poltergeist, a very demonstrative poltergeist event.
What was that?
Decades ago.
What happened?
Probably, I don't know, 25 years ago or more. 11 o'clock at night. My wife and I are laying in bed. Halloween Eve. This is appropriate. Halloween Eve. Okay? Hardwood floors downstairs in the entrance hall, on which tables are all set up with lots and lots of candies, bags, because bags are being given out. Large, very large candy bars and bags of everything piled up. Hundreds of kids having to be taken care of.
Okay.
Halloween, big deal.
Big
Ghosts
deal.
in the trees, and this is a family thing that was big deal every year.
Decorations.
Oh,
the
yeah.
The whole 9 yards.
The full Monty.
Got it.
All right. So we're laying there, and there's this crash, bang, boom, crash, 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 blah, 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 like 1,000 malt balls just dropped to the hardwood floor. Made all this noise. It sounded like the sound I estimated seemed to last forever, probably about 3.5, 4 seconds, which is a long time for noise to continue. And I said, oh, geez. Stay here. I'll go take care of it. Whatever. I'll get it all. I'll go take care of it, the mess. So I go downstairs. Nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong. She doesn't believe me. She comes downstairs and she says, oh my God. I said, yeah. I don't have to do anything. Everything's perfect. I didn't touch it. It's just like we set it up. So that was a really interesting event. And poltergeists, a lot of times.
So it's just a sound that you heard.
Yeah, just a sound.
A sound like something crashing.
Like everything on all those tables piled all up had all crashed to the floor and bags broken open. Yes.
Right. But nothing did.
Nothing.
You had children at the time?
I had teenagers and they were gone. They were out of the house. They were gone.
You sure they weren't fucking with you?
The teenagers? No.
Yeah.
But, well, what would they have to do? Have a
Make
recording?
a loud noise?
Yeah, they would have to crash all this and record it, wouldn't they?
Isn't that more likely
And
than
spend
a ghost?
hundreds of dollars doing this.
Hundreds?
And, well, that's how much we always spent.
On recordings?
No, on the candy.
I mean, just sounds. It sounded like mothballs, you said, right? Or like malt balls hitting the floor, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah,
it sounded like?
jawbreakers, whatever.
Jawbreakers,
Candies, hard things,
Yeah.
whatever.
But that was it, just a sound?
That's a lot.
But it's not necessarily a ghost.
When nothing has happened, well, no, we're talking about poltergeist. Now,
Right.
poltergeists
Okay.
don't have to be anything manifested as a ghost. It can be an audible sound.
But was there anything more to the experience than just a loud sound that turned out to be nothing?
No, that was pretty good.
That's not enough.
For a starter, that's pretty good. I probably like, okay, what's going to happen tomorrow night?
Did something happen tomorrow night? Or
No,
no? That was
no,
it. Just
no,
one
but
loud noise.
To
and
me,
that's
it was a big deal. It was like, wow.
Imagine if that was that whole movie, Poltergeist, just a loud noise.
Well, wouldn't that be that entertaining?
Wouldn't be a good movie.
No,
right?
you have to have chandeliers swinging and crashing and all that kind of
That's
stuff.
what I was expecting.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting just like candy hit the floor, but no candy actually hit the floor.
Well, I never said that my life was that exciting. It's not, it hasn't been that great.
But I want to get to this idea that you're trying to pursue of measuring consciousness or trying to figure out whether or not consciousness survives death.
Right.
Like what do you want to do and how do you want to do it? You can't just do it through remote writing or automatic writing or
Right.
psychic mediums or
Right.
there's got to be a way to figure this out.
Yeah. So we started the Institute, and I said, okay, let's stir the pot up. And in fact, we thought we would join an organization, and they didn't want us. So we got rejected. So we got rejected and then crawled off and conjured up a contest. So the contest says you have to have some credentials to enter this contest.
What kind of credentials do you have to have as a psychic?
You have to no.
Okay.
You have to have background in the topic of and you could be a priest, a minister, a rabbi. You have to have background in the topic of studying and understanding. Does the other side even exist? We're not asking you to tell us what it's all about.
Okay.
Just does it friggin' exist, right? So you might be a producer or a director of a television show for years, and you've got more stuff on film than you could imagine of different kinds of weird things happening that you have no explanation for any of that. And you've made a study of this for a long time. You could be a good candidate. You could be a detective, and maybe you're solving murder cases by using psychic mediums.
So you'd have to have something you bring to the table.
So you have to have something to bring to the table, and you can't send us an essay. You're going to write an essay to present your case. And it can't be more than 25,000 words, which is about 50 pages.
So you're just essentially going to allow people to come up with some convincing argument and bring it to you. So you have a contest to do this? Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's what it is. So we say, okay, there's a deadline to get all your applications in. And then you have many months. Deadline is actually the end of this month, the 20th of February. And then you have...
Jamie's got it up here. Bix essay competition, best evidence for afterlife. Essays will be judged by 5 renowned experts.
That's up to 6 now.
Oh.
We have another judge, which is a good thing because
the winning essay gets $500,000. Second
that
place
too
gets
much?
3. No, it's perfect.
Okay.
It's good. Second place gets 300. Third place gets 150 grand. So if you have a semi-shitty near-death experience story, you get 150. It's an interesting way to do it, but I would hope there would be some better way to measure. The expression extraordinary
wait
claims.
a second. Yeah, but now wait a
require
second.
Extraordinary evidence.
Yeah, true. But you got to remember that, well, first of all, we're causing conversation and thought about the subject.
Right.
And we're stirring the pot. And this kind of contest has never been done before. And
what if they're all terrible? Do you still give first place to someone who's terrible?
worse than that, what if there are only 3 applicants?
Right. Even
First,
worse.
second, third
And
price.
they all suck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is we have some really good people.
Jamie's thinking about writing one right now.
We have some. Yeah.
$500,000.
We have some very good people who are entering this contest. Their credentials are terrific. They're very good. They're authors of many books. There's extensive background of these kinds of folks. So we're excited about that. The response has been favorable. And so then,
Well, it's a lot of money on the table.
well, they have
I would
until
imagine.
August the 1st to do this.
Oh, okay.
And then the judges. Now,
So here we are. What is it? The 24th? What is it? 24th of
Yeah.
February.
sure, all right.
Okay.
So then the judges start. And we just added a physicist to this group. He's the 6th one. And so he understands judging things and being a critical thinker. And so he really rounds out the group very well. And so the judges start August 1st, August, September, October, and they're supposed to be finished by November 1st
Okay.
and have made decisions. So then we announce the winners. And we want to post all the 3 winners. And I suspect the judges are going to have a problem. It's going to be damn hard to pick 3 out of the group because we have this has been generated a lot of interest, and we have some really good folks into this. So we are going to get permissions as an applicant. They have to give us permission we don't own anything. We just want to put it on our website so people can read all the essays. So maybe we have 20, 25 essays, not just the 3 winners. So it's going to give people a chance to really read a lot of different kinds of arguments. And maybe
By what metrics are you going to accept evidence of the afterlife?
Good question. Okay. So we patterned this after the legal system of the Western world. And the Western world says 2 things. That you can convict providing you have evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't say 100%. It says beyond a reasonable doubt. Number 2, witnesses really matter. The veracity and the quality of the witnesses matter, and how many did you have to something? You know, what is it that is being claimed here? You know, and what is the cross correlation, collaboration in whatever it is that you're trying to relate here.
So when you're talking about convicting someone for a crime, here's the problem with that analogy. Crimes are real. Like if you're talking about convicting someone for a murder, the murder's real. The person's dead, and you want to catch someone. So you have eyewitness encounters, you have evidence, you have all these things, and you can convict someone on that evidence. There's no evidence that ghosts are real. There's no evidence that the afterlife is real. So you're guessing.
Wrong.
How's it wrong?
Wrong.
But murders are real, right? You would say murders are way more real than the afterlife?
What you said is wrong in this
How's it wrong?
context.
In what way?
An applicant.
An applicant.
Who's a detective? Who has been using
Dick Tracy?
psychic? No.
What?
In fact, I got my watch right here. I'll talk.
Talk to that watch. That turned out to be real, right? Remember when we
It
were
did.
kids?
It is.
Dick
It is
Tracy
there.
used to talk to his
However,
watch. We would be like, that's crazy.
The time didn't fast forward 2 hours. I come from the Pacific time.
Oh, it didn't?
No.
That's weird.
No. And so I haven't been using my cell phone, and I forgot to bring my
What are you
charger.
on, some shitty service? Mine changes everywhere I
I
go.
don't
Doesn't
know.
yours?
I'm going to talk to my
anyway.
granddaughter because she gave it to me.
But you
as a
understand
gift.
what I'm saying, though? Because we actually talked about
Well,
this.
wait a minute, though. This guy's a detective.
Oh, a detective.
Solving murder cases.
Right.
Using mediums.
Right.
Isn't this like, wow?
Yeah, but when they solve murder cases using mediums, if that has ever been real, and I've talked to some detectives that say that's all horseshit, because I did have a long discussion with someone who is he's an investigative detective and he solves crimes, and he's like, there's no evidence that any psychics have ever given you any real information.
Now, he hasn't investigated the subject. He has had probably one experience, maybe 2
this is his personal opinion on cases that he's been involved in, and maybe he's wrong, but this is just what he said. He said people are desperate. They hire psychics. Yeah. But my point is, Murder is real. The difference is you're convicting someone for something that absolutely happened. When you're talking about trying to figure out whether or not there's an afterlife based on the kind of evidence that would be used to convict someone of a murder, that doesn't necessarily work, because we know for a fact that murder's real. We know for a fact that human beings are real, and that if you kill them, you're a murderer. We know, well, this is all fact. We don't know whether or not there's an afterlife. So to use the same obligation or the same preponderance of evidence that would convict someone of a crime for something that you don't even know if is real, they don't necessarily. You can't. They're not comparable.
No, wait, no, I wouldn't say. Don't put the seriousness of an event in terms of the harm it caused as not being as being more legitimate than an event that actually produces information that you should have no way of acquiring.
Well, let's not say that then. Let's talk about it in terms of something different than a murder. Let's talk about it in terms of vandalism. Just someone spray painting some building somewhere, right? Let's talk about that when no one gets hurt. Just physical stuff and someone spray painted building.
So let's take that example and suppose you went to a psychic medium and she says, what I'm hearing is that your house is going to get spray painted with a message on it on the backside of your house.
I'd go to that lady. She probably fucking did it. She knew it was coming.
You're impossible.
That's how she knew it was coming.
You're impossible.
No, I'm possible. I'm very possible. But this is all nonsense.
But no, well, wait a minute. No.
Okay.
So there is a predictability in events, however.
Only if someone actually can prove that they've done that, and no one's ever done that. No one's ever said someone's going to spray paint your building and it wasn't them that did it.
How do you know?
Prove it. Prove it. Show it to me. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, people have definitely spray painted people's buildings.
I do.
Right?
But
no one has definitely showed you that there's real evidence that consciousness survives death, and you can talk to someone from beyond the grave.
There have been a mountain of readings for sitters where the information comes that says something is going to happen, and it happens. It's prognostication that's a day or two or a week away, and it happens.
Maybe.
No, it is. You just have to read.
But you got to show me specifics if we're going to have this conversation. You see what I'm saying? Like, for you to be so convinced, you should have things that you could pull out of the top of your head right now and tell me specifically that this event was predicted by this person and this is how it happened, and there was no way they could have known about it otherwise. Otherwise, you shouldn't be convinced.
Are in the tens of thousands.
But that doesn't mean anything. When they're written down after the fact, that doesn't mean jack shit.
No, but they're actual accounts of things. You have to say, well, the authors are all fraud.
Maybe.
The authors are all fraud. Their sources are fraud.
The problem is you want to believe. That's the problem.
So what you have to
Maybe it's true. Maybe it's true.
I got the solution
You
for
don't.
you.
But here's the thing.
Robert,
I love you. You don't know.
I got the solution.
What's the solution?
The solution is for you to have a sitting, for Christ's sake.
Maybe that is not even good enough.
Wait a minute. Earlier it was.
No, never good enough. It was interesting. Interesting to have a sitting.
You could have both chocolate and vanilla ice cream and you wouldn't be happy.
No. You look, there is no proof ever that someone has been able to accurately perform some sort of psychic demonstration. That's the whole James Randi thing.
You need a sitting badly.
I don't need a sitting, man.
Yes, you do.
You have a belief in these things that may or may not be founded. But the problem is you don't have any evidence. You're not saying specific. Like, I can tell you specific things that I know are true.
Yeah.
And I'll talk to you about them because I was there or I know about them. Right. I can talk to you about martial arts events. I can talk to you about stand-up comedy events. I know things that absolutely did happen.
Right.
And therefore, if you argued with me and said, there has never been a UFC fight, I go, well, that's not true, because I could tell you specific dates. I can tell you what happened, what the result was. I can show you a videotape of it. You don't have that same knowledge of these things, but you have the same conviction that I have when I'm talking about things that are hardcore facts, like a mixed martial arts event or, whatever, fill in the blank with whatever the event you want it to be. You have the same sort of conviction that these things are real, but you don't have the same kind of hardcore evidence. Not only do you not have the same kind of hardcore evidence, well, give me an example. Give me an example.
So an example is any kind of information coming from the other side that maybe you don't even know about. Okay, so it can't be explained away as telepathy or clairvoyance because you don't even know about it yourself.
Give me an example of that.
Well, pick anything that something's going to happen.
No.
Or that something
Give me
did
an
happen.
example of someone actually doing this.
Okay, so that Aunt Martha just died.
Who the fuck is Aunt Martha? Is this a real person?
Well, you said give me an example.
No. I want an example of a real psychic prediction that turned out to be
I can
true.
fill this
that
table.
you can tell me.
I can fill this table up with examples, with literature.
I just want one. You don't have to do that. Just give me one that you know about. Listen. Like I'm saying, I have the same conviction in things that I know are real as you have when you're arguing that psychic ability is real. I just want you to tell me one.
Okay, my own sitting. Okay. My father came across in the sitting, and my father was killed in a private plane crash when I was 18, and it wasn't his plane, it was his partner's plane, and so she tells this to me, and I hadn't thought about anything to do with his partner for decades.
How long ago was this sitting?
How long ago?
How long ago did you have this sitting?
A few days ago.
You're a famous public person, and your history is available. Someone could find this out about you.
But that's maybe true about the plane crash, but not the first name of the pilot.
Not the first name of your father's partner? Why couldn't someone find that out?
Yeah.
Why couldn't someone find out the pilot?
I think because this is over a half a century old. I think it's like 60. I'm 76.
Right, but there was probably a record.
I think that's stretching it.
I don't think that's stretching it at all. You were telling me about UFO encounters from 1947. You were telling me about people that have seen things. You were telling me about events that happened that are in the historical record.
Okay, so let's shift to something else that's could not have been written down.
Okay.
So in my own setting.
Okay.
So my wife passed February 19th last year, and she was in and out of hospitals a lot for a long time. I was kind of the nurse at home for a couple of years. And so toward the end, she was in the hospital about 3 days before she wanted to pass at home. So the challenge was how to get her out of an area in the hospital that was basically a waiting area for people to die. It was an area that's where people were that weren't expected to leave. Okay, alive. And so there was a day there where my son and my granddaughter and I were playing a lot of loud music in the room for my wife. And the medium said to me, and I'm recording this, and the medium said, thank you. Your wife wants to thank you for all the music that was played for her before she passed, all the music. And I said, well, I don't know about any music. I don't remember anything. And
why did you say that?
Because I didn't remember
You
anything.
didn't remember playing loud music?
I didn't remember. What
But
the
you
heck
remember it now.
What is she talking about?
How do you remember it now?
Because of my granddaughter. Because I had recorded it, and we listened to the recording together after I had done the sitting, and my granddaughter says to me, Pop, don't you remember? Oh, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I said, oh, God, that's right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I forgot. I completely forgot it.
Well, that's certainly interesting and unusual.
So what I don't know if she would do it, but I think she probably would be very interested since it's you, and because you are a big figure, and you're easy to learn about, you'd go into this assuming, which she's a very, very honest person, but you would have to go into this assuming that everything about you is so public, you can find out a lot of things. So
that's the problem that I always have with psychics.
Yeah, but
don't tell me something that I already know.
That's the challenge for her, is to tell you something that nobody else could possibly know.
But even that, well, nobody else could possibly know is a stretch, right? But tell me something that I don't know. Whenever I've had friends that have had psychic readings, I always say, well, how did they structure the questions? What did this go? How did this go? What did they say? Were they fishing around? Did they accurately get to it, or did they give you probing questions first? It's almost always probing questions. And they told me about my grandfather. How could they know? I go, you know about your grandfather. Why don't they tell you some shit you don't know? Everybody tells you things you already know. Tell me something I don't know.
So that'll be the challenge for her, wouldn't it? Is to be able to tell Joe Rogan things that essentially only Joe knows.
No, don't tell me things I know.
Okay.
Tell me things I don't
tell
know.
You things.
Tell me reality that I'm not aware of that has nothing to do with me.
Or that may happen soon.
Yeah, well, something along those lines. Yeah, something where, don't say you're going to spray paint my house and then
But
go
it's supposed to be a sitting for Joe.
Yes.
It's supposed to be for
I understand.
You. So
it's just the problem is they tell you things you already know. And I'm like, this is just, I guess there's something to that, right? There's some sort of clairvoyance to that if it's real.
You're saying, well, then that's only relevant because they're reading my mind. Which is a holy
That's
cow.
what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying they're telling you, they're giving you these questions in a way. Like, I have a friend who does this. He's a mentalist. He does it out of Las Vegas, and he tells me it's all bullshit. He tells me how he does it. He tells me how he structures these questions and probes people and gets people to give up information. Then he makes these educated guesses, and then they start saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe you know that."
You are not supposed to say anything more than yes or no. You don't talk during the sitting. You're supposed to say yes or no. Okay. That's it, or say nothing. That's it. You're not supposed to talk.
Okay, well, listen, I haven't experienced this before. I try to keep an open mind. If someone actually could do this, that's pretty spectacular. But to my understanding, and I've spent a lot of time reading about these things and reading about skeptics and the James Randi challenge and all these different people that have tried to attempt to demonstrate psychic ability, that no one has ever successfully done that.
Okay, let's go back earlier.
Am I wrong, Jamie?
Well, wait a second.
Like, if the James Randi challenge, like he's...
Oh, he was a fraud. Forget
James
about it.
Randi was a fraud?
Yeah, he was. A lot of people. He wouldn't have ever paid out anything if somebody had been successful. People all know that. No, he would not have paid it out because he arbitrarily disputed everything that would have been attempted, and finally people quit because he was not going to be fair in his judgment.
What is fair, though, in terms of psychic ability? If you could prove psychic ability
the
beyond a shadow of a doubt,
is what's fair.
But what was his rules? Like, what did he want you to establish?
I don't care about James Randi. I care about Joe Rogan, and my
I wish we never talked about this. We just stuck with aliens.
Okay, but wait a second. Wait a second. Earlier, correct me if I'm wrong, you actually said, yes, there could be legitimate mediums.
Yeah, it's possible.
And there can be better ones and really terrific ones and different capabilities.
Yeah, maybe. My problem is your conviction, your belief in this is so strong.
Well, no, but what happened to the Joe of just a little while ago that says, yeah, there can be legitimate mediums, as opposed
that Joe's
to saying
open-minded.
They're all fraud because I know a magician.
No, that Joe's open-minded. I'm willing to believe that it's possible, but I don't understand why you're so convinced by just one story about music in a room. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe this lady tuned in to the Akashic records and figured out that there's some music in the room when your wife was dying.
I would argue start with, and time is precious for a busy guy like yourself, but you have to start with reading good literature, reading good books.
Okay, tell me a good book on psychics.
I'll have to send you a list.
Okay.
I'll send you a list of things to read, and I will do that. You got to give me how I do this.
Okay, we'll talk afterwards.
Yeah.
But you understand that most skeptics believe that this is all bullshit, right?
Well, they would, or they wouldn't be skeptics.
But I mean, that's what they do. They study things that are
kinds of
extraordinary.
skeptics.
Okay.
There's open-minded skeptics too. You can be skeptical, but still be open-minded, right?
Right.
Right. And I don't immediately buy off on anything I'm told just because I hear something. I like to get to a point where I stay open-minded, and then I may start to shift into saying there's more and more maybe to this. Let me investigate more. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to let go until I investigate more. So just because I had one sitting here with this particular person, I've had others years ago.
But you seem particularly convinced that...
Well, this particular person was very good. It was 3.5 hours long.
Okay, so was there another example besides just the music?
Yeah, there were a number of other examples. I'd have to stop and regurgitate everything.
Okay.
Because
But
right now
it was enough to
I'm all
convince you.
pumped up for space questions about space, cosmology, ETs, survival of consciousness, and what kind of car is the most fun to drive.
What kind of car is the most fun to drive?
The Lambordoodle.
The Lambordoodle. What is that?
It's a name I gave a car I just bought.
What is it?
It's an orange Lamborghini called a Ursa or a,
Ursus. Yeah, the
Ursus.
truck, the SUV. Yeah.
it's an SUV.
Yeah.
640 horsepower, 4-wheel drive, 8 speeds forward. It's the most fun car I've ever had in my life.
It's a cool car. My friend Russell
That's it.
Peters has that exact same car.
Who does?
Russell Peters, hilarious stand-up comedian from Toronto, Canada.
It's an exciting car.
Yeah, he loves it. He's got the same color too.
In fact, I bought 2, and one's going to be given away at the Larry Ruvo Cleveland Clinic Gala in October in Las Vegas. It's going to be auctioned off.
Oh, really?
And the price of that car is $286,000.
I think it's
out
more
the
than
door.
that.
That's tax and everything. And he's going to auction that car off and come October.
I think they're lying. I think it's more than that.
You should
I
be-
think that car's like 300 and something, isn't it? That's an expensive car. When
It says MSRP base is $200K.
oh, the base,
I mean, it
280 for
depends
the
on how much
base.
you get
Yeah,
added to it.
Russell's was like super loaded up.
You ought to
think.
be at the gala to bid.
No,
Why not?
I got things to do.
Why not?
I'm busy.
Oh,
I'm
come
gonna
on.
go be
It's a
talking
lot
to a
of fun.
psychic.
Larry
I don't have any
Ruvo puts
time.
on a hell of a show every year for these galas, and they're fantastic.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good time. So that's the most fun car to drive?
For me, it has been.
What other cars have you driven that are like contenders?
I have a Corvette my wife bought me when I was turning 70, and I can't control it.
Which one is it, ZR1 or something?
I don't.
Something
It's a
crazy?
Stingray. It's
Wow.
it's too much car. It's goosey on the rear end.
Ah.
It's too squirrely.
Yeah, I get it.
And I can't predict where it's going to go.
Well, you just need to learn how to handle it. The new Corvettes are better for that. They're mid-engine now.
I can't see out of them.
The new ones?
The rear window. There's no rear window. It's like 4 inches high.
Yeah, it is a little smaller.
And an 18-wheeler's up behind you. What do you do?
Go hit the gas.
Yeah.
Don't let them be
It's just-
behind you.
They make me too nervous.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, the new ones are pretty sweet though. It's and it's much better traction with the mid-engine design.
Yeah.
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 Let's get back to aliens. So we've been talking for a long time, but I really want to talk to you about this. What evidence do you think is the best evidence in terms of what physical evidence? Is it just video? Is it just photographs? Or do you think there's physical evidence that either our government or some other government has somewhere that could show beyond a shadow of a doubt? Because I know Jacques Vallée, who was on the podcast before, discussed we were talking about specific metals that had been examined, that these alloys, that if they had been produced in mass, it would be billions and billions of dollars for these alloys. And that this was, although not evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence, seemed to indicate that because of the examination of these alloys, that this is not something that's mass produced in this country right now, or
Right.
in any country right now. Like that this is something that if it was done, it would cost an insane amount of money to create, but yet here it is.
Right. Yeah. So people have pieces of things that are like that have been, I don't know, I assume they've gone through electron microscope and, for a look-see, but they are very unique in how thin they are, how many layers of material they have, and the view, the opinions are that we can't make them.
And that these things have been recovered from crash sites.
Apparently.
Apparently.
Yeah.
But that is part of the problem, right? Is that there's so little real concrete information. Like there's no consortium of scientists that's aligned together that's saying this is 100% from another planet We've all examined this. We've got together with the people at Stanford, and we've done these tests, and this is what we know, and here's the press conference, right? That's never happened yet.
Well, so far there have been investigations on these materials, and they're anomalous.
Yeah. Do you think that's
They could be, something that's part of the kitchen of the UFO,
Right.
some bowl that
Yeah.
they ate out of, who knows? And because how can you tell about a craft just because of one little piece?
Right. Other than Bob Lazar's experiences, which, he has, of course, the most spectacular experience. I actually haven't been there at S4. I wish there was a way we could convince whoever's in charge of that to allow people to film this, to allow people to examine this, to bring in the scientific community, if it is a real thing. But the other thing about the Lazar story was that element 115. What are your thoughts on that? This was the idea that there was some super spectacular element that was a new version of propulsion. So instead of shooting something out of the back end, it was literally bending gravity.
Yeah. I don't know enough about it to really comment. I mean, I'm not saying about anything to do with disparagingly with Bob Lazar at all. I'm just talking about the element 115. I have no understanding of its properties and what it can do or not. I don't have any information like I do on these other subjects, survival of consciousness.
Yeah.
I don't have any information about element 115.
Did you talk to Bob about it?
Oh, no. No, the conversations about it were somebody had taken his, and he was kind of regretful that he had let go of it in some way, and he wanted to get it back, and
this was when he was at S4.
yeah. So, but I don't remember much about conversations about what all of its properties were, and that kind of thing. Did you bounce a ping pong ball and it didn't come back to you straight? It took off in a different direction or something, or a candle flame, I don't know about those things. I don't know. But I think that I had something else I was going to say and I forget now on that 115. Oh well, I forget what I was going to say.
His diagrams of the UFO of the.
I know what it was.
Oh,
okay. Getting back to these kinds of treasure. You were talking earlier that really what ought to happen is there ought to be a major program where you're gathering all the best scientists to analyze the hell out of all these materials that have been retrieved.
yeah.
But the problem is, a lot of this stuff purportedly is in corporate hands.
Corporate hands.
And some in government hands. Okay? And it's come to be kind of corporate treasure and national treasure at the same time, because there's a relationship between a company and the government that has this kind of treasure. It's a national kind of treasure, no pun intended there, but I mean it's a in a sense it's a national treasure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's also a phenomenal treasure that isn't understood. And so the problem is, it may be the most precious thing around. You don't have diamonds that are more valuable.
Right. Especially if it really is from an
Pound for
extraterrestrial
pound.
craft. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's drug out every 10 years, looked at to see if there's anything that has improved in 10 years on the understanding of X, Y, and Z that makes sense, or has something else shifted? Has something else happened? in the last 10 years that could make a difference on trying to understand the material or craft or whatever.
So you think that's what they do with it? They drag it out when technology is advanced and say, what do you think now?
Right.
And allow people to examine it.
And then it goes back in storage because not enough has changed. Not enough has changed. We were talking about the speed of our technology, but it's all relative, right?
Right.
So this technology is so much more advanced. You could do 10 years for 100 years and still be way short.
Now, how do you know that this stuff is in corporate hands? Is this just hearsay? Is this the discussions you've had? I would imagine, because you're so open about your interests, that in your conversations with other people, whether it's at NASA or there's got to be other folks that also have similar interests that come to you and want to talk to you about these things.
Yeah, so there's a community of people, not necessarily NASA people, but that have been trailing this for years. George Knapp, for example. And so it's not poorly known that certain corporations are involved.
It's not poorly known, so it's kind of common knowledge
Among
some people.
folks.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
corporations are involved because they recovered it or they acquired it, and that if they were able to mass produce whatever these alloys are or whatever these particular the properties of these metals are, there would be obviously some amazing commercial value for this stuff.
It may be too precious for that.
What about bodies?
Now, you talking about the Las Vegas desert or what?
I'm talking about alien bodies. No, not like Sinatra's enemies.
Splashes in Lake Mead at 1 o'clock in the morning?
No, I'm
Off
talking,
of a cliff?
I'm talking about like alien bodies. That was one of the weirdest stories about Roswell, was that they had not just recovered a crashed UFO, but they had recovered these alien bodies.
What do you think about Jackie Gleason's wife's story about he and Richard Nixon?
Yeah.
Nixon taking him to the base and showing Jackie.
Yeah, that I remember that story. I had a friend who knew Jackie Gleason, and he said that Jackie Gleason had recreated in his backyard what he saw, what Nixon showed him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that apparently he was so blown away by Nixon. I guess they were drinking. This is the legend.
Yeah.
Nixon and Jackie Gleason were drinking. Jackie Gleason's a fucking hilarious guy. Probably loved to drink. I mean, definitely loved to drink, and probably so fun to drink with. Him and Nixon are talking, and Nixon says, "You want to see a UFO?" and takes Jackie Gleason to wherever it was, Hangar 18 or wherever it was where they had this UFO, and shows him, and apparently changed Jackie Gleason's life, and he couldn't stop talking about it. And what I had heard was that he had it recreated in his backyard. This thing. See if there's a story
That's
about
a powerful
that.
impact,
Close to
isn't
the
it?
story I'm looking through.
Yeah, yeah.
So he saw something.
Yeah, listen, I'd be friends with Nixon just for that.
It wasn't because of the booze, right?
No, I don't think it was because of the booze. I mean, look, I am as ridiculous as it sounds for someone who doesn't believe in psychics. I'm a believer. I want to believe. That's probably part of my problem is that I want to believe.
Sure.
And also, there's so many planets. There's so many stars.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the universe is littered with planets. And the idea that this is it, that you and me, this is as good as it gets.
Well, the odds of that are 1,000,000,000 to 1.
Yeah, they're not that good.
It's off the table. The odds are so unlikely.
And then when you take into account people like Commander David Fravor, who I've had the pleasure of sitting down and talking to and listening to his explanation, and then when you realize that the way his vehicle, the vehicle that he observed, moved, mirrors what Bob Lazar talked about from 1990. Mm-hmm. Now we're talking. We're in this weird realm of like, huh. So I'm a believer.
Yeah.
So if the government has it, I mean, shit. In the 1960s, when Nixon was president, and him and Jackie Gleason are partying, that's a credible story, or at least
so.
a fun one.
I always thought it was.
You find anything?
I can't find the thing about the backyard because it just keeps bringing up his UFO house he had in New York, which is like a UFO-shaped house and a bunch of interesting, cool shit inside of it.
Oh, whoa.
But this story,
Maybe
Well, he
that's-
was influenced, wasn't he?
Maybe that's part of it. Okay. Upon his arrival, armed guards took Gleason to a building in a remote location on the site. There, Gleason, who harbored an intense interest in UFOs, saw the embalmed bodies of 4 alien beings 2 feet long with small bald heads and big ears. He was told nothing about the circumstances of their recovery. He swore his wife to secrecy, but after their divorce, Beverly freely discussed the story. That bitch. He swore to secrecy. That's what happens when you divorce them.
That's what I find.
In the mid-1980s, when ufologist Larry Bryant sued the U.S. government to get it to reveal its UFO secrets, he tried without success to subpoena Gleason. Holy shit. Look at this. So that's the thing in his house.
Yeah.
That's his backyard. That's his UFO house. So he built a house that was what they were talking about. It wasn't that he just built a UFO. He built a fucking house shaped like a UFO. Where is that?
New York.
Is that still there?
You ought to buy
is
it,
for
Joe.
That's what I'm
sale.
talking
Yeah,
about,
buy
bro.
it.
That's what I'm talking about. It
Here's
was
the-
for sale?
Well, here's the realty.com thing for it.
$12 million.
12 million. Gee, oh, that's a little steep for a fucking
Yeah, it's
goofy
probably
looking circle
negotiable.
house.
You could negotiate.
Must be
that.
negotiable. But it's Jackie Gleason's. It's probably worth it just because it's Jackie Gleason's. Listen, The Hustler is one of my all-time
Oh,
favorite
yeah.
movies. I'm a
Absolutely.
pool player.
Yeah.
And so that movie, I've seen that movie literally probably 100 times because they used to put it on in the executive billiards in White Plains, New York. They would play it late at night all the time. So we would be playing pool. They'd put The Hustler on. Everybody loved it.
Yeah.
Such a great movie. And Jackie Gleason was amazing in it. And a serious role, too. Not a comedic role at all.
Yeah.
I mean,
he was
that
great
was-
in The Honeymooners, wasn't he?
He was great in everything.
Oh,
Jackie
it was
Gleason was
true.
great in Smoking the Bandit.
Yeah.
He was just
Yeah,
great.
it
I
was.
love that guy. But I love him even more because he's a UFO freak. Do you think that they have some sort of body somewhere?
Yeah,
You do.
I do.
What makes you think that?
I think what would be? Why do I think that? Trying to narrow it down. Well, I think that I'm trying to not get into conversations. So I think that because it's in the I think there are enough different kinds of sources in the media about people seeing things. I did an interview years ago with Safro Henderson and Stan Friedman and Kevin Randall. Went to her house in California because her husband was Pappy Henderson. And Pappy Henderson was one of the pilots that flew stuff out of Wright Pat. And he said, they were in a grocery store one day, and the Enquirer had a big article, aliens revealed, so on and so forth. And there's the checkout stand. And she said he took the story seriously. And after they checked out, he said, well, I guess I can tell you now, because it's out. So he told
You thought
her,
the Inquirer was serious?
he thought it was whatever it was. Enquirer, I think it was. Could have been some other one, but let's just
Right.
use that as a
Right.
as a
One of those tabloids.
as
yeah.
one, magazine. And and he said, well, I guess the story's out. I can tell you now about I flew
The records.
crates and wreckage out of and he told her about the whole UFO thing. And I believe that she said that he said to her there were bodies.
Now, this was part of the story that went with the whole Roswell crash, was that there was a local mortuary that was told to make small coffins,
Right.
and that people had said that they had seen these bodies, and that the wreckage was flown in two separate planes to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and that if they really thought it was just a balloon, why would they fly it in two separate planes to Wright-Patterson?
Right.
And that Truman, it was Truman, right? That
How
went to
was it
meet
they
them
couldn't
there?
recognize balloon
Yeah.
material? from
Yeah.
something else, and you had a debris field that was
Yeah.
a quarter mile wide, half a mile long.
Yeah, it's all pretty fantastic stuff. But again, part of my problem is I want to believe. That's part of my problem.
Yeah.
Is that I'm willing to
Yeah.
bullshit myself.
Well, do you believe in a God force?
A God force?
A God or a God force? Do you believe there is such a thing?
What can you define it?
Well, do you have any belief that there is a supreme being of the universe or a God force of some kind?
I don't think it's impossible. I don't know. I don't know what creates a Big Bang. Like what starts this whole process? What causes nature? What causes all these elements to fuse and create carbon-based life? What causes planets to exist in a Goldilocks range around the sun? Is it just happenstance? Is it coincidence? Is it just
Big Bang, is on its way out.
the Big Bang's on its way out?
It's on its way out.
Oh, okay. So it's like fossil fuels?
So string theory is on its way out.
Is it?
Yep.
What about all those guys that have been scribbling shit on legal pads for years?
So like a physicist friend of mine said very recently, that perhaps an entire generation has wasted its time. We've lost an entire generation of people, maybe longer than that, in my opinion.
So what do they think now?
The thinking is, first of all, it's a little bit bogus to think that the universe extends only as far as you can see, 13.5 billion light years.
I think they don't believe that, though. They think that's just as far as we can measure it, right?
Well, they assume that the universe is expanding, and they're judging that based on 13.5 billion light years of sight.
Right.
Okay, that may be a very, very small neighborhood, but that's as far as the cave wall is, and you're not seeing beyond the cave wall, right? You're also telling me that you know a lot about the cosmos, and you want me to believe you, but yet you don't know what 95, 96% of the cosmos is, of the energy. You have no idea. Dark energy, dark matter.
Right.
You haven't a clue.
Right.
And you're telling me that you know all of this stuff about the cosmos, and you're missing 96% of the information. Really?
I think what they're trying to tell us is this is what we know so far. I think that's what they're trying to tell us. I think they're as perplexed about dark matter and dark energy as we are, but they have a lot of information about background radiation, about the signals that seem to
In a neighborhood.
indicate. Yeah.
In a neighborhood.
Yeah, in the neighborhood.
In our neighborhood,
Well, if the
right?
universe is infinite, 13.5 billion years is nothing. It's like literally this block.
Yeah.
Not even.
And
right?
then, of course, what singularity? Big Bang started from what?
From what?
From
Right.
what? And so string theory is a series of 11, 12 theories, hypotheses stand on top of each other, and they all have to be perfect. They all have to fit, and you wind up with this other conclusion that basically everything started from nothing.
Well, they don't think it starts from nothing. They think it started from an infinitely small point that exploded in an instant and created all the matter that we see in the universe today.
So I concede the head of a pin as not being nothing.
Okay.
I concede that.
Well, better concede it because it's got
I've
more matter
I've got to concede that
than
that's
anything
the theory.
in our solar
That's
system
only the
or
theory,
galaxy.
though.
Okay, right. It's just
Just a theory.
Right.
So it's just an opinion.
Right, but it's an opinion by people that have been studying this their whole lives, and they
And now it's out. It's going out the door.
it is.
That's what I've been told.
Who told you that? The psychic?
No. Now, if I correlate the physicist that told me that along with the psychic, you really have something here.
No. I think there's been a bunch of different ideas about the Big Bang, whether or not it's a constant cycle of expansion and contraction, and then there's been
I kind of actually like that one.
yeah.
I
it's an
like that
interesting
steady,
one.
a certain kind of steady state of elasticity, expansion and contraction that continues to go on with a orderly force being whatever dark energy and dark matter is to maintain organization, to maintain harmony and everything. So you reach maximum elasticity, and then it starts to retract again.
Yeah.
To your density is maximum density, and you do this all over.
That is a theory that I've heard.
I like that one.
Another theory that I think is pretty fascinating is the theory that inside of every black hole might be another universe. That the idea of inside every galaxy apparently is a supermassive black hole that's exactly 1/2. I think it's 1/2 of 1% of the mass of the entire galaxy. So this intense, massive black hole at the center of every galaxy. And the theory, at least the one that I had read, was that if you could go through that black hole, you would enter into another universe. And that each of these galaxies has there's infinite number of galaxies, essentially, right? There's hundreds and hundreds of billions of galaxies. And each galaxy has a black hole inside of it, a supermassive black hole, and that through that, you would go into another universe. And that there's infinite universes because there's just all these portals, and inside each one of them, there's hundreds of millions of galaxies or hundreds of billions of galaxies. Each one of them has a black hole. Go through that, you reach more universes with hundreds of billions of and it's just, that's true infinity.
And you can have the same effect if you have infinite bubbles. So you have multiverses
Right.
that are these bubbles. Maybe
Yeah.
the bubbles are 100 or 200 billion light years in diameter, and they just have unlimited. So I don't buy that space is finite. I think it's endless. I don't think there ever was a beginning. I don't think there was an end to the universe. And so I think time is only relevant when it's connected to some kind of matter or electrical energy or like electrons or protons or something like that. And otherwise there's no time, because what are you measuring it against?
Right.
So that means that, okay, time could be infinite.
Okay.
And so is distance. There was no beginning and there is no end.
Yeah, that freaks us out. But so should 13.5 billion years, 13.5 billion light years. That should freak you out too. All of it is beyond our possibility of understanding, because it's just so massive. Like when you see the number 13 billion, it's like, okay, I see it. I know how many zeros there are, but my brain's not ready for that.
Yeah.
It doesn't really compute.
Yeah.
But what does that have to do with the concept of God, though?
So I was asking you, do you believe in a God force? And you said, yes, you think so.
I said it's certainly possible.
Okay, now why do you think it's possible?
Because the universe is so spectacular that the idea that there's some force that's created it doesn't make it any less spectacular, or it's so insane. Just what you're looking at on a night sky, on a clear night sky, if you're in a place with no light pollution, is so insane. The idea that there's some God force as well that makes all these things happen and creates all these things, and there's actually like a good path and a bad path for at least sentient life forms, and that there's some sort of ultimate goal for this matter coalescing. Like, it's possible.
So if you think there's a God force that's omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, what role does thought play in that?
It's a good question. Thought could be what we were talking about earlier, that this could be how this human animal creates, how this human animal innovates, and how it interacts with other animals and gives it motivation to create and innovate. And this is what creates this new form of life. I've often said that I think that human beings might be some sort of biological caterpillar that gives birth to an electronic butterfly. That we create something because of our desire for innovation and for material possessions, and there's a lot of weird instincts that people have. You got to wonder, how are these serving us? Like, how is it serving us to live your whole life to try to buy a new house and a Lexus? Like, what is it? What is it about that? Well, there's something about the pursuit of material possessions that encourages innovation and encourages the production of things. That's what people do. They make things. And if this is what our goal is, just like a bee makes a beehive and we make things, what's the ultimate expression of those things? Well, the ultimate expression would be a new form of life. And it seems there's a lot of work being pushed in that direction. There's a lot of work being pushed in the direction of artificial intelligence, of robotics. I mean, there's so much research that's going on right now to try to create these autonomous things that move around on their own, whether it's autonomous soldiers for the battlefield, or whether it's drones that can fly themselves and operate on artificial intelligence. Like, there's this direction is going to eventually, if you talk to people far smarter than me, like Elon Musk is terrified of it because he thinks it's unchecked and that it's going to lead to something that's super potent, sentient, far smarter than us, and has no use for us. The next
not a good
stage of
thought.
life. Not a
Yeah.
good thought.
Yeah. So, so then you keep it open that God can be a creator and can respond to the power of prayer. If you are praying for somebody, and there are a lot of studies that say the power of prayer works more than just a placebo kind of effect. You know, that it actually works if you have a control group and a group that you're praying for, and a group that's, you know, there've been a lot of tests like this that are double-blind tests, and it works in a laboratory kind of context. What is it that's responding to the request for prayer? Is it a God force? What is it that's responding?
I don't know that that's true. I don't know that it's true that prayer works like that. I do know that the placebo effect works, and I do know that the mind has extraordinary properties that we haven't harnessed. I do know that people have the ability to change their state of mind, and it'll change their physical well-being. I do know that people have the ability to boost their immune system through breathing exercises and meditation, and that we don't totally understand how they're doing that or why they're doing that or why we can't recreate that without that kind of discipline. Or
There's
maybe
a
this is
fellow
an emerging property of being a person.
who's written some good books. He's a MD, retired, and I guess he left the hospital world because he was intrigued with the anomalies he found among his patients. And one of his books, I think, has something to do with the title, The Power of Prayer. His name's Larry Dossey, Dr. Larry Dossey. And it's a really book that's worth reading.
Okay.
He authored it quite a few years ago.
And he talks about the power of prayer.
The power of prayer. And I think he gets into the investigation of the power of prayer. That works.
So that, like, well, you know, I think that's also probably works in a negative way too, right? This is what the concept of voodoo was. The concept of voodoo was that someone puts a curse on you and they let you know they put a curse on you, and then your life is fucked. And then you get it in your head that your life is fucked, and then you have this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, supposedly the results under tested, you know, legitimate test conditions are that the results are greater than you can explain otherwise, just because of just you may not even know that you're being prayed for. So
right.
it's a controlled situation. So you don't even know that you're part of the group that's being prayed for.
How would you measure that, though, when you're talking about response from illness? And everybody varies depending upon your immune system, and there's a lot of different things. Your nutrition, youth, health.
I think that gets into how the tests are set up.
Right.
In order to make sure that they're balanced in the group, the sample group that's being prayed for, or the person. Maybe it's an individual.
I think if someone knew you were praying for them, it would help. That seems to make a lot of sense. If you know you're being loved, it'd make you feel better. It'd make you energized. When you're loved, there's a feeling, a reaction.
According to the literature, not in just his book, but others, that it helps also the number of people that are praying for you, and how committed everybody is to that how earnest they are in the effort. So apparently that matters.
What do you think about all that, Jamie? It's a lot. It's a lot to think of. Listen, Robert, we've had a long conversation here. I think we're at 3 hours in. Yeah. 3 hours. It's been
With no
interesting.
restroom break, and I'm just
Yeah,
fine.
you're amazing. A lot of people, they tap out early. They run out to pee. No, you handled it like a champ. But thank you for all your work. Thank you for all the things you're interested in investigating, and thank you for your time to come here and sit down and talk to me.
Well, I tell you, this is my pleasure. This is for me that it's a great honor to be able to be on your show.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.